Welcome, 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 one and all, to yet another episode of WIC TV. It's a cross-ideological space where we come together to talk about issues both political and cultural, from the silly to the serious. And gang, today we are talking about free speech, social media, and the government. What should be the relationship between these three entities? Should the government be stepping in to tamp down on speech, on disinformation, on misinformation? What rules or roles should the government have when it comes to communicating on social media? We got some great guests to talk about it, and I'm excited to have them. I'm going to give the mic first to Mr. Stale 2000. Tell people who you are, what you do, and what are your thoughts on the topic at hand. Go ahead, sir.
Sure, I'm Stale or Brian. I make YouTube content, and I work in AI, so I do a lot with AI and social media in San Francisco. I guess my position here is that I think that multi-trillion-dollar social media companies have too much control over the internet, and I want to take away that power and give it back to the user. How you do it is I want to make them common carriers. I want to get rid of Section 230 protections to make people liable. I want to make personalized algorithms controllable by the user instead of by the large companies, and I want to target enemy foreign nations. So that's kind of my high-level positions. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sure we're going to get into all of that as we go. ReasonRiffs, welcome again to the stream. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, thanks for bringing me back. By day I'm a physicist, theoretical physics with statistical physics. And in the evening sometimes I'm writing for the pragmatic papers. And I have a particular interest actually in this topic. I think it's one of the biggest things facing us right now. So, I mean, at first glance, it looks like me and Stale would have to defend legislating against platforms, but I actually think there should also be a defense on following the status quo. I think things are going very, very wrong. I think there's evidence for that. So the question isn't whether measures should be taken, but what measures should be taken and what evidence is there for them working. So I'm looking forward to a constructive debate. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it as well. Thanks for being here. Next up, we have Stormwolf.
Yeah, I'm Stormwolf or Storm. I'm a pretty big advocate for free speech. I think that when we introduce things relating to the government censorship, we have to be very careful, and I'm broadly against it because it is a very dangerous slope, both from a rights perspective and people's ability to engage in criticism, but also from a pragmatic perspective in the sense of what it does for public engagement with our institutions and our country as a whole. So I'm broadly against most forms of regulation because I think they tend to impede too much on people's right and lower trust in our society.
Okay, thank you for being here, and I'm sure we'll get into it as we go. And finally, last but not least, Mr. Pisco, please.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having. I think it's a really important debate too, and I'm interested to see the different perspectives here, especially because it's not just an issue for America, although that's my focus, and this is very applicable to even some liberal governments in Australia and UK under Albanese and under Keir Starmer, enacting some amount of controls on social media stuff. So it's really topical. In America, we have some legislation that's being proposed that addresses some, I think, agreed upon and will be agreed upon societal evils related to social media, addiction, things like that, childhood or minor access to certain platforms or to dangerous communities and stuff. I think you'll find a lot of agreement, at least for me, that some of these things are real issues. And of course, I believe that a lot of these social media companies are bad actors and have created products that are harmful to if used improperly. And I think that a lot of their algorithms and a lot of their platforming does cause social blight and issues. But I also think that's true of regular people and a lot of the speech that they've been deploying, right? It is true to me. And well, are you okay? Something's happening.
Yeah, ignore me. My camera just passes out sometimes. I'll see if I can
No
get to
worries,
work. Sorry.
I think a lot of discourse by politicians in this country, especially the MAGA movement, is harmful to our country. I think that a lot of speech that's conducted on normal cable television and on normal channels and instrumentalities of speech that, or when I say normal, I just mean non-social media related channels, are harmful. And so you're not going to get disagreement with me on that notion. It's just a question what is justified in response. And I think our experience, at least in America, maybe it's different elsewhere, at least in America, is that putting this in the hands of government control, especially if there's a federal nexus here, again, depends on the regulation we're talking about. Then my view might differ, but a lot of the ones that are being proposed puts far too much control in the hands of either powerful litigants, plaintiffs' firms, and or the president of the United States with this new unitary executive theory and with what Trump is doing. So I just don't understand if there's a question of like power imbalance. Why do we think that this will address that when so much of our agencies have been captured, when so much danger exists in executive overreach? Again, it'll be different based on what regulation we're talking about, but I'm not convinced that rights, which have been one of the strongest bulwark against encroachment from the executive and from the government, should be altered to address these issues unless there's a really, really, really good reason and a really narrow restriction.
Okay, well, thank you all for being here, and let's get into it. The floor is open. If you guys start talking over each other, I will interject, and I might have questions as we go. But other than that, take it away, boys.
I'm happy to let you guys,
Sure.
it's a general view I have, but if there are particular restrictions, I know Stell mentioned Section 230 and the common carrier stuff, so whatever direction you guys
Sure,
want to go.
I'll go kind of in that direction. So I'm curious. I'll start off with a question. Why should like these massive companies be able to have their cake and eat it too? So I'll agree that these social media companies, when they have an algorithm, it's like speech or something, and in some ways they are protected by doing that. But if it's speech, it's their speech. Why should they be able to hide behind, I can do whatever I want and I'm not liable for it because it's the user doing it, but actually they have control. It's not in control by the users.
Yeah, is that a reference to Section 230?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's
Yeah, no,
the idea. Yeah. Sorry.
I don't think that Section 230 addresses that issue specifically. They used to say the harms caused by the algorithm. I think that those are and should be attributable to the extent that there's actually liability there. And I'm, not convinced that there ought to be for some of these kind of tort theories. So I'm not actually convinced that there are good theories of liability. But if there are, right, I do think the algorithms should be attributable to their authors. But I understand Section 230 to be talking about what other interactive computer users are doing, and whether that should be taken as the speech of the owner or operator of the interactive computer service. So in other words, I don't think that they shouldn't be held liable to the extent of culpability. I just think that the liability shield is to protect like user-generated content, among other things.
Do you think that context matters for speech
Yes.
and the meaning of words? Right. So in terms of the context, how much liability comes from knowing the context in which something is said?
How much liability comes from knowing the I don't know what that question means. Are you saying legal liability or what do you?
Well, yeah, I'm leading up to what kind of who should be legislated against, because what I'm saying is that the platforms have a far greater overview of the context in which something is said. So it's not just the meaning of the words, but the effects of those words. And the user, I mean, I'm not in the I disagree actually with quite a few. You mentioned UK before. I mean, the measures that go after the individuals, I think is simply ineffective. So I'm not that interested in those types of laws. I'm more interested in effective laws. Ultimately, it should be the obvious thing. I'm just not I'm not approaching this from an ideological perspective. And one of the key
to
things.
answer your question real quick on I think what you're asking is like, where is the cost of compliance and the relative cost least in terms of mitigating harmful effects? I would agree with you that it's in the hands of the information holder, it's in the hands of the owners of these platforms, and not in the hands of the government. So I mean,
yeah, and that's linked with the context in which they have a better grasp of the context in which something is said, right? There was a case. I mean, I have way too much evidence for this discussion, but there was a case of a tweet that got 350,000 views, and it was in the UK and encouraged the burning down of a refugee center, for example. Now, the person who wrote that, I maybe there should be some laws against what they say, but I feel like the responsibility is far more on the platform for voicing those, for amplifying that with their algorithms, than it is for the individual, because the platform, in fact, creates the context in which the words are said. The initial user doesn't know where those words are necessarily going to go. It's the platform that decides that. They're an active participant, right?
So you're saying that because the algorithm is like promoting that tweet, which is calling for violence, there ought to be some level of culpability on there, because that tweet in its own, it's bad, but in isolation, if it's not purported out to more people, there's not really any harm with that. That's your kind of point?
Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, I know I've been looking at some of Pisco's conversations about freedom of speech, and for you, if you don't mind me saying, it's broader than just the First Amendment, right? There's a broader notion of what freedom of speech should be.
I think so. There's a normative one because obviously the First Amendment is not going to apply legally to the UK. So there is some notion that I think that the First Amendment is good, and a lot of the standards elaborated by our courts have been good, though not all. And I think that there's a notion of free speech that is independent of the freedom of speech as protected by law. So to answer your question, yeah, I do have like a more broad conception of free speech than just the First Amendment.
And you think censorship is an important part, or the lack thereof is an important part of free speech?
Well, it depends. Yeah. So as a norm, I think different and best practice in general, I think a lot of these big platforms should err on the side of non-censorship. That's just my normative feeling as to what they should do. Now, different in more like specialized places. I think if back when Twitch was only about gaming, or if you were having a chat that's just about dog loving, right? Or if in anyone's particular chat, I'm gonna feel different about censorship decisions. And so those have to do more with like what I think are best practices. And so in general, I'll be like, yeah, I don't really think that Twitter should have banned Destiny. I don't think that Twitter should have banned Nick Fuentes. Those are things that I believe. But I don't think it's a free speech issue from the government perspective.
And what constitutes censorship for you? Other than banning is an obvious one, right? But what about how algorithms can be altered? How people can be recommended? Does that constitute censorship?
I think shadow banning would be like a form of like probably censorship. I think effectively, like if you're saying that like someone's speech is unable to completely get out completely, like not because of like the algorithm is designed not to, like if the algorithm is specifically targeting certain types of speech and saying, nope, this isn't going to go out, that could be a form of censorship. Now, I think you got to it with the violence thing where like maybe some types of censorship could be okay. I think when we're talking about freedom of speech, we're usually talking about like some kind of expression of like political, social, religious, scientific, or like personal opinions and information online.
Sure, but there's a large spectrum of that, especially as it relates to algorithms. You brought up shadow banning. There's a lot more things that you can do than just shadow banning. Like, let's say you specifically choose, I want, almost like if you promote half of the group, you're almost de-promoting the other half, right? And so like you could put in whatever you want to push kind of whatever narrative you want, Republican or Democrat, by changing a couple variables, even though you might not be technically banning one or two people.
Yeah, so to put it really clearly, I think that the choice to censor is itself a free speech decision that ought to be protected. Now, I have views about trying to limit that, and I think that like they shouldn't do that. My preference, you guys remember like all this controversy that I had about not banning people, right? And that's just the view that I hold in terms of what I think. Like, I don't think Twitch should be having this pretty hypocritical banning policy. I didn't think that one of the things that I liked about what Elon Musk did is that he brought back a lot of the people who were banned, and I liked that. Now, there are a lot of changes that I didn't agree with what Elon Musk did with Twitter, but those are my own personal views. I think that censorship, though, and the decision about what to platform or what to promote is also an exercise of free speech, in my view.
Exactly.
Doesn't it bother you?
I just want a bit of clarity.
One at a time. Go ahead, Riff, and then Stale.
I just wanted a clarity from Pisco, but you acknowledge that some level of censorship may be required. It's a minimalization problem as opposed to an absolutist position that you have.
When you say it's required, I guess I need to know what you mean by that. Like, do I think that platforms should have the right to censor people? The answer is generally yes. Now, there are some cases where, and Stale mentioned like common carriers and like Title VII and employment discrimination. There are some places where I'm going to be like, okay, government can intervene here and there, where there's a really important societal need and kind of very limited, narrowly tailored decision or source of law that is sort of limiting the scope of whatever provisions at issue there. Employment discrimination, places of public accommodation. But the wider that you make that exception, I think it's dangerous, and I don't want to extend it much further than that. But in general, I think censorship is like a protected aspect of speech, and it's not like a issue from a free speech perspective.
Sure, but at like a high level, doesn't it bother you that, from my perspective, it feels like 20 people with PhDs in machine learning in a room in Meta could be controlling like half of the internet right now, and we wouldn't really know it, and we wouldn't really have any way of stopping that because I can't control really my algorithm on these various platforms. That's why I was suggesting, like, one of my suggestions is you should make these platforms common carriers, which, it sounds is very extreme, but like, I mean, what's more important, social media or like the phone these days? I mean, I'm on social media way more than the phone. Why is it so ridiculous? I mean, that a phone's a communication network, so is social media, right? Like, how is it? I guess it's a broadcast model. Well, like, why is this such a crazy thing to suggest? Like, maybe these massive networks shouldn't be just. Maybe they should be a decentralized network, right? You could have, you are required by law to upload to the feed or something. I don't know how you'd make it a common carrier, but that's why like why not do something like that?
I'm not like totally against any regulation of social media companies. I think Trump has been far too accommodating to these social media companies and far too close in terms of relationships. I think one area in which it should be addressed is through antitrust law. That's an area where the administration, I think, has been horrible, dropping cases, having DOJ approve mergers and shit like that on media companies, or at least news related companies. And so I think that there's plenty of non-speech restrictions that can address some of the issues there. But you're right. I mean, I'm not. If you were asking like, how is it okay? I'm not okay with Mark Zuckerberg and these algorithms and all this power being like concentrated in a few hands. But I just don't know that I agree with the proposed solution. If anything, I might think like the government. What you have in a lot of these traditional monopoly situations is there just is no alternatives, right? There are no alternatives to using the telephone company you're at. There's no alternatives to the ISPs. And so that's where I don't really think that's analogous to a lot of social media companies. It's not that there's not a lot of monopolistic pressures there, but I do think there are other channels of communication online. And I would just as soon have the government make like some public social media network, or to have other kind of regulations that don't get to the heart of like speech restrictions.
I mean, that's a bit of a straw man argument, if you don't mind me saying, because there are other measures that can be taken. And the question for me, for you, I would pose then is, okay, we agree that things aren't going great in terms of the influence of social media. I don't know if you've looked at the studies on it. It's pretty extreme. Right, cool. So what measures would you suggest that could make a marked difference right now?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not really like an expert on what would be good for. I'm not like a sociologist or anything. I'm not like. I don't claim to have expertise in that area. On the issue of like control, I do think that it makes sense to have like public options when it comes to social media, and like a public, the equivalent of a public square in the context of social media companies. So I wouldn't be against that. I wouldn't be against applying antitrust laws to a lot of these corporations, or to have like reporting requirements, to like have regular check-ins with legislators and regulators. But on any particular issue, right? Not just because I don't have the optimal strategy to curb societal ills. That's also true of individuals' corrosive speech. That's also true of politicians' corrosive speech. I don't know how I'm going to win hearts and minds there. Doesn't mean that I agree with any particular restriction that you have. I think you have to propose a restriction or propose a regulation that you think should be enacted that we disagree on, and we can examine that.
Yeah,
That's what I was gonna say, because I was gonna say the one thing that's kind of hard is like, it's kind of hard to talk about like regulations in a vacuum. So we want to tackle Section 230. We could, if we want to tackle something that ReasonRiffs wants to provide. But like, because I think both me and Pisco will say there's probably certain regulations you could say that like we're not necessarily going to disagree. Because I don't think either me or Pisco are hardcore libertarians. We're like no regulation ever. It just really depends on the regulation.
Yeah, ReasonRiffs, can you give us like maybe a rundown of what you think that the government or the governments should do in regards to speech on social media platforms that they are not doing? Something that you would specifically advocate for. Yes.
I mean, from what I see is that there's two key problems actually. One is being a bit ignored here because we're talking about like extremism or like the anti-science misinformation that gets spread around. So that definitely needs to be addressed. And I do think, at least on a temporary basis, there needs to be a suppression of certain things going into people's feeds. And by doing so, this is the interesting thing. I think censorship is an outdated term, frankly, at least in the way it's being used, the way it's being discussed in terms of in the terms of free speech, because this isn't a zero sum. This is a zero sum game, right? When someone says something and it dominates a feed, it suppresses everything else. So what I would like to see is there being a broader range of views being shared on someone's feed. And that's the other part. I think you can also depolarize by recommending things that don't follow in line with what someone's been looking at.
Yeah, so let's focus in on that, because I am curious. So you would regulate social media by requiring a certain broad range of views to be posted on that platform.
Yeah,
boosting.
through. I want to see the algorithms themselves being regulated. I also want to see them being made transparent. The algorithms should be for us all to view and to see what they're using, and how these feeds are being created. There's a paper that came out this year showing a marked influence of changing these algorithms on the political positions, and unsurprisingly, people moved towards the right when they took these views in. I can share afterwards if you're interested in this paper. And I think the only way to address that is by influencing the algorithms. I don't think there's any such thing as a neutral algorithm here, even chronological. And I think without addressing that, I think things are going to get much worse. It has the polarizing effect. People get stuck in these bubbles. Now that ultimately is censorship, but it can lead to a broader range of views.
So I have
so
a couple questions with
go for
that
it.
though.
Storm will
Because
come Pisco, go ahead.
Pisco kind of referenced earlier that like we kind of recognize that designing algorithms is a form of speech in and of itself, right? So in that regard, we are kind of tailoring speech. Just would something like Blue Sky then be like not allowed because Blue Sky does kind of exclusively host like, or not exclusively, but predominantly hosts like liberal views, right? Would that be like what would happen to Blue Sky's algorithm? Would it just become
Would it
gay versus
cut-
Twitter?
No, but I mean, it's relative to. I mean, it would have to be relative to the platforms. I mean, they can't be penalised for having a narrow selection of political views, right? So
Sure,
I
but
mean, they can
doesn't
only
that,
do
like-
so much that they have. I mean, that you can't.
Sure.
Wouldn't be.
I guess my concern is that could lead to like platforms saying like, okay, we're gonna ban content that we don't agree. Like you talked about the algorithms being tailored. Well, platforms can then ban content they don't want to do because of that algorithm requirement, and then they can just have their algorithms like they can say, well, we're presenting a fair share of views, but it just ends up being exactly what it would have been before because they only have those views, right? If anything, I would say that's worse because now you're getting platforms to become more and more insular.
Well, I mean, as I say, platforms need to start somewhere, and.
Well, yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go on.
No, I was going to say, I mean, look at the platforms we already have and the views that are already on there. So, and that's where the biggest effect's going to be. I mean, if you look at EU regulation on platforms, they also look at differences in sizes. So the bigger the platform, the more regulations applicable to it. I think it's also good because then smaller platforms, can be more dynamic and they're not expected to do so much. Because of course, this will cost the platforms money, right? But I also think that their algorithms, and if you look at engagement, I mean, that they want something that's to the opposite of what is good for society. It makes them money. It increases engagement.
Yeah, that's what I'm concerned about. So, can we talk about that a little bit? Because I understand and I would agree with you that these algorithm. I don't even know what it would mean for an algorithm to be neutral. Maybe neutral with respect to political view or something, but I don't really know. I'm worried about whether the restriction is neutral. Is the restriction that you're proposing? Number one, can you lay it out a little bit more? Like, are you saying fine companies that don't do what, or make it a crime, or create?
Oh,
some
cause I
cause of
mean,
action? And sorry, just this one part,
sorry,
right?
yeah.
And is the criteria for penalty some kind of content / viewpoint restriction? That is to say, dependent on what is being said, as opposed to some like non-speech related criteria, like amount of amplification, etc.
Well, I mean, this is only one strand of legislation, and I think it's the one that is probably the most appealing to you guys because it is a question then as to what censorship is, right? And this is why I think you're asking me this question. So you can simply look at the type of things it would recommend and recommend something that it really would not recommend normally, and you at least include some of that in the feed. And yes, in terms of punishments, I think punishments need to be beyond financial because, frankly, these platforms don't really care about financial punishments. I think that happened in the EU when X was fined a few $100 million. I think it's short change to them. And we should take seriously,
but
frankly.
It's not just that, right? Because like,
He's
if there was a
suggesting
porn
speech
company,
algorithms.
if there was a porn company that came and said, "Well, hang on a second, you platform have deprioritized, right? Let's say TikTok, my porn content, and so this is not typically shown to people. So I'm suing you as with the cause of action to get damages and to get you to change your algorithm to have equal time for pornography." You would say that's ridiculous. That's a straw man, right? I'm assuming that you'd say that that's not something you agree to. And the question is like, it's not just the fact that something is deprioritized. It's something that is deprioritized that you think should be prioritized. It's not by virtue of it being less promoted. There's some other set of criteria that would cause you to think that certain conduct should be like, or content should be equalized, right? It's not just the fact that it's deprioritized, because there's a ton of like useless shit that you don't care about and that you wouldn't care to equalize. That's deprioritized. Fair.
Well, that's another issue, right?
Yeah, there's no neutrality.
To delineate between factual and entertainment type content. I mean, this factual content, I'm sure you agree, to at least to some extent, these media companies, these platforms, they're acting as part of our education system, not just for any child that may watch it, but adults need education too. And if it's claiming to be factual, then it's claiming to educate. And I think we treat our education systems with the respect of thinking of what our children should see, but I think we should also treat adult education with just as much seriousness. And so I do think it may require us to state, when we put media on YouTube, to say whether what we're saying is factual or non-factual, and there should be a label with regards to that.
So like,
of course,
let's give an example that we all agree of, like bad misinformation. So say for the following example, COVID misinformation. Someone sends out blatantly false information about the desirability of using ivermectin to treat COVID, or otherwise to say that the vaccines are not tested or whatever. In that context, something we both agree is bad misinformation that probably causes a lot of problems. Do you think that if a platform chooses not to censor that content, chooses not to deprioritize that content, that they should be penalized? And who decides what is in that category of badness?
Well, I think it should be, the UK system is almost there. There's a body called Ofcom. They're a bit spineless right now, but in essence, it would be the kind of thing I'd imagine would work. And yeah, they could decide to, they could at least throttle. They wouldn't even have to, block a website, but they could certainly throttle people's access to it to discourage people from going there.
Right. So a government mandate that the company.
It's a Department of Algorithmic Speech, basically. Department of Algorithmic Speech.
What you're saying is that it makes it, that Ofcom could basically like make it harder for that platform itself to be accessed.
Yeah, there could be one measure. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah.
I feel like the issue.
It would be like a Ministry of Information, right? It would be some kind of government agency to say this is the right. And I'm not even to say that I think the government should be engaged in a lot of speech, counter speech. The government is allowed to have opinions. Okay, I don't take the view that like governments need to be neutral about what's in the best interest of the people. I would totally probably agree with you that they're allowed to be partial about what is good and what is bad. The government is allowed, but I think you are saying that it would ultimately be a government decision about what fits in this bucket of bad information and what is,
a regulatory body. It's a bit like talking about the independence of a national bank. In America it's being tested right now, right? But in general, national banks are considered fairly independent in most countries. You'd agree with this?
Yeah, I think that monetary authority, not in every country, I'm going to be honest with you. There are a lot of places where the monetary authority is not independent, and it's being tested right now in America, where we have a bunch of pressure being applied to the Federal Reserve, and that's one of the reasons why I'm fearful of government intrusion in these matters. I'm not convinced that it improves things. Now, I can grant that some agencies and some societies have independent agencies or whatever, but yeah, talk me through it. Are you biting the? I don't know if you would consider biting the bullet, but it would be some kind of government actor that says this is the good information and that is the bad information, and you better, if you're a platform, deprioritize the bad information, right? Something like that.
It's a government adjacent for sure. Yeah. They couldn't have.
No, sorry, I keep interrupting. Please continue.
No, I'm talking enough. If you have something to say.
What's up? I was just gonna say that for me, like, I can even grant that this could be some independent agency that has independence. The issue is those standards are still going to be set by legislation, right? And that's always subject to change. The one thing I think of for here is that, like, I think it's great when we talk about COVID misinformation. There's two issues I have with that, though. One, what happens when Trump admin comes in, and now that independent branch can be changed by like legislation passed through Congress that says, actually, let's say we took Ofcom, and Ofcom was some U.S. thing with the same name. Ofcom, you should be looking for these factors of suppression, right?
Can we pause right there, because it's such a good example, right? The government's current position in America is that trans-related ideologies are literally public health misinformation. That is to say, people who disagree with the government on treatments for gender dysphoria and stuff like that, that this is a public health risk. That is their official position. On that view, right, at least in the American context, and again, we're happy to expand, and you can give whatever response you have there, I'm concerned with bad faith actors in government saying, actually, we should deprioritize all trans-related communications that paint body positivity or trans-related treatments as positive in the same category of medical misinformation.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it would be ridiculous to say that there's absolutely no risk. The funny thing is, if these measures are effective, and we agree they're effective, but they compromise to some extent freedom of speech in terms of censorship, then
I'm not convinced they're effective.
Okay,
We'll
let's assume
get to that after. Let's start with
assume
assuming they're effective.
Okay, yeah, because
if you want,
if we assume efficacy, then it's going to decrease the chance of a government like a Trump administration for being in power in the first place.
Why?
Right? Because that's the whole
that?
point. I mean, to reduce extremism. So, I mean, maybe it would be a different Republican administration that's not so extreme that would actually clamp down on trans people's rights, right? So,
I think the issue is, and maybe this is bridging into the effectiveness. If you want to finish what you're saying, you're welcome to. But I feel like the issue is, and this was kind of what I was getting at, is like, one, like I said, like this does give the government control over that speech, which means it's going to get censored. And this is where I think that it does end up being ineffective, because I think when speech gets censored, I think you were kind of getting it. I think I'm kind of do like a little bit of a ramble, but like I think there's 3 types of speech when we're talking about freedom of speech. There's the situation where you have no freedom of speech, right? Things are getting censored and people are unable to engage. I think that's the worst case scenario. I think the medium kind of bad, not great, not like either good nor necessarily bad, depends on context. Situation is like where we are right now, where we have people can say anything, but there's not like healthy discussion, right? Because of, I think, some of the problems you raised up. The ideal solution is you have freedom of speech, but everyone's kind of engaging and you're having healthy discussion. I think the issue is when you put them into this when you have this kind of leads to the censorship, where what ends up happening is either people are going to go into their hug boxes and stay isolated, and those movements are, or what you do is which either leads to them staying in this current environment where we're just not engaging, or it leads to even worse, where people are actively being suppressed. And that has 2 effects to me. One, it can oftentimes lead the movement to grow and go unchallenged, which means that if people find it, they're more likely to stay in those environments. And 2, I think it lowers trust in our institutions, in the sense that, like, a huge reason why so much COVID misinformation still exists today, whether or not it was true, was because people believed that Biden and the government were trying to censor it, so they became more susceptible and sought it out because they see these stories of, well, what's the government trying to hide from me, right? I think this is where I question the effectiveness of it.
So I'll butt in a little bit. So I'll agree with you guys is like that there's this problem with the government of algorithmic truth. I'm confused about why you're seeing that that's like a real problem, but you're not seeing the same problem with 20 guys in the Meta office doing the same thing.
Well,
Wait,
I think I
said that.
wait, to be clear, I think and this was kind of what I said when I said I think we're not in the best situation, we're not having healthy conversations, is that I actually do agree there does seem to be some issue in our current social media dynamic. What I'm disagreeing with is I don't know if this remedy solves it effectively rather than making the problem worse.
Well, here's another remedy. All of these algorithms must be controllable by the user, right? So Meta, Blue Sky, whatever. Yeah, they can have their website, they have their whatever, but the user should be able to make the algorithm whatever I want.
Do you think the user would I guess, like, for instance, like, do you think an average user is going to be looking for content that confirms or doesn't, or challenges their worldview?
I mean, yeah, they would probably. I mean, I'm not convinced the algorithms don't already do that. But
no. I agree. I do agree with that. I'm saying, though, I don't know if putting it in these hands of users changes that, because I think part of the reason the algorithms are designed to do this is because they know it keeps people on their platforms longer and gets more ad revenue. Similarly, because people want to see more of what they kind of like, and that's what content that confirms your worldview does. So when it comes down to choosing,
in some ways, the algorithms are already doing that automatically, right? I mean, I get
exactly,
what you're saying. There's a meta level to it. Like, I don't want, like, I want to choose for the algorithm not to give me the kinds of things that I tend to click on or whatever. But do we really think that most people are going to click on the algorithm that doesn't give them what they want to see, as opposed to the algorithm that gives them what they want to see?
I think they're making an active choice. I think they would, right? So the example, I mean, the analogy I'll use is like the subreddit model, right? I think that, you wouldn't be modifying your own algorithm. Most people wouldn't. There would probably be thousands of people giving their own possibilities of algorithms, right, that are then branded in some way. And then you would, like, my algorithm is it's the New York Times algorithm, or mine is the Fox News algorithm, or whatever.
Or
and
the Groyper algorithm, or
or it could be
anti-vax algorithm, or the X, Y, Z. Okay.
I guess my point is, it just feels like that when you give those people the choice, they're going to look for communities that agree with them. They're going to look for algorithms that agree with them, because it's kind of natural that humans want to confirm what they already believe. It's kind of, I feel like we've seen that. And like when we talk about the algorithms are designed to keep people scrolling. People who and that's done by giving them content they like, because that means because people want content that they like. It seems like people would inevitably do that on algorithms themselves. And I don't know if I trust the average person to be like, and maybe this is me being a little bit elitist, I don't know if I trust the average person to be consciously thinking about their own biases and what they're not seeing.
But isn't this like almost like a you're making the anti-free speech kind of argument? You're saying we need to prevent the users from choosing their own algorithm.
No,
Wait, how's that
That's
anti-free speech argument? Wait.
That's not
Hold
anti-free
on,
speech
one
at
at a
all.
time.
I mean,
Pisco, go ahead. Pisco.
That's not anti-free speech at all. That's suggesting that people's tendencies are to seek out the content they want and not the content they don't want. And if you're thoughtful enough to be rethinking your priors and to be seeking out things you disagree with to challenge your worldview, you're not a problem. You're like, if you're the kind of person who would tend to be reflective enough to consider their algorithm such that you would want to customize it, then you're probably not an issue, right? Like you're probably a kind of person that we don't need to worry about as much. And that doesn't have any, an acknowledgement of that doesn't have any bearing on what regulations we do or don't approve. It's not anti-free speech.
I think Stormwolf's point about.
I mean, you're using it as a counter argument though against the idea of, hey, we should do this thing, right? So it kind of is, right? Because
no.
It's like an anti-user.
No. It's wrong on that score too, Stale, because you're offering a potential government regulation, and one of the I think necessary things for you all to argue is that the regulation is indeed effective, right? And you offered one, and you said, well, what if the government forces certain companies to have more customization options for their algorithm? Now that bears on free speech, and a response to that might be, well, would this even be effective? And what is that it wouldn't be effective.
No, not at all. And I mean, this is something that's looked at in terms of neutrality of algorithms. The way you measure it is, so you look at correlations, right? So if you've watched 5 pieces of content, they look at a 6th piece and it's got the highest correlation with everything that you've seen. So you can look at correlation of tags, for example. Maybe it's a commonality of words or themes that come up in the content. So this is a measurable thing. So it wouldn't be that hard to legislate. Just like in environmental regulations, they have a critical levels of pollutants in the environment. You could have a critical correlation or anti-correlation with a piece of content that is then suggested to the viewer. Because
there's usually some societal agreement about what constitutes, not always, I'll add, a pollutant, right? Based on people's genuine agreement that, like, you shouldn't be getting cancer, and scientific agreement about what constitutes something that could be harmful to your health. I don't
exactly, but that critical.
Do you want the government to be in the position of making those determinations as to dangerous ideas as well as dangerous pollutants?
I would rather the government making some of these decisions than the companies whose interest it is to keep people in these bubbles, which Stormwolf correctly pointed out that there's a human nature to always go towards what you, to confirm your own views. And you mentioned a key verb there, which was to look. I don't think most content people are taking in, they're actively looking for, they're given it. There's a difference between being given content and looking for it. Now, I think there's a lot of freedom we could leave in the looking category there. People want to go and look for things, they can find those things. But it's the giving aspect that's concerned here in terms of the feed, right? This is what we're really discussing. And in this sense, firstly, yes, there are measurable the metrics that they can use for knowing whether there's something that's recommended feeds that bubble or bursts a bubble. And secondly, there's a huge parallel with environmental regulation. I'm sure you agree, you're happy that some carcinogens, they have a level in which they're not in the environment. Now, whether that causes cancer is a statistical thing. But it's not a certainty.
Sure. Yeah. I know. I agree that I think it's great for the government to be involved in questions of public health. I think it's great to have the government involved in issues related to seatbelt usage and having safe standards when it comes to driving. I think that we just have a difference in how we would treat things that are expressive conduct and things that are not expressive conduct. And I don't put pollutants in the bucket of expressive conduct. And I think things that are expressive conduct get extra protection because we're fearful of the who decides question in the realm of expressive conduct. That's where I'm So let's do some concrete examples. If there was a case on one of these regulations that said you have to deprioritize Hassan Piker, let's take a couple examples. Hassan Piker, Nick Fuentes, Alex Jones. Should these be identified by the government as harmful for public health, such that they, or content like it, should be deprioritized, mandated by the government?
Okay, but I'll point out there's 3
Can you
choices
answer those
here.
first, though? Yeah.
So choice 1 is the government decides. Choice 2 is the Meta CEO decides, and choice 3 is the users, right? So if you want to choose
Well,
the
yeah.
middle choice, you could.
Well, why
just
don't
because
we
that's the
start with
status quo, right?
why don't we answer all of them, right? So like,
Sure.
I already am not like super comfortable with these oligarchs having tons of control over stuff. I'm not like, there's nothing inconsistent about being concerned about that, but also being concerned about government intrusion there. So I'll ask the question in terms of government regulation. Are these the kinds of content creators that the government should mandate deprioritization? And the 3 examples are as follows: Hassan Piker, Nick Fuentes, and I think I said Alex Jones.
And can I just have one clarification real quick? I think,
Yeah.
at least for me, I think that, I don't know, I can't speak for Pisco. I'm willing to have my mind change on that government regulation is effective. I think it would be really cool if we could find one. My big issue is I'm looking for government regulation that is both different from the status quo, and also that even if it isn't different, it can. I'm like, the big concern for me is that it's different, and that it also seemingly won't lead to those like kind of like destroying faith kind of things I brought up before, because I think that's a huge concern for me as well that comes with government involvement in speech. So it needs to be effective to mitigate that. Anyway, sorry, answer Pisco's question. I just want to clarify that.
Yeah, so we have some notion that there's harmful ideas out there, that there's things like kind of like pollutants, right? And I don't think anyone here would disagree that something like carbon monoxide levels or whatever the fucking most asbestos constitutes a pollutant, right? So let's take the worst of the worst in terms of these actors, but a lot of people are concerned with, right? Among libs, let's say, Hassan Piker, Nick Fuentes, Alex Jones types. Would you say that these are of the category that things like those people, and including those people, should be mandatorily deprioritized by the government's edict? Yes or no on those 3 examples?
In terms of deciding specifically, there is a case for this. If there's an immediate threat in terms of to a democracy or the incitement of violence.
Would you do it now? Hold on, he's asking, would you?
That's already unprotected.
Yeah, you're king for the day. You get to decide. You get to wave your magic wand and enforce these social media companies, the government, to make laws that force these social media companies to deprioritize in the algorithm, as in people can still look them out, right? But they won't be fed to people. Hassan Piker, Nick Fuentes, and Alex Jones. Would you do that?
No reference
indirectly, yes.
Just to clarify, but I want to get to that indirectly thing. Yeah. Not by reference to a category of already unprotected speech. So incitement is already a category of unprotected speech. Harassment, already a category of unprotected speech. Defamation, already a category of unprotected speech. So let's not make references to categorically unprotected forms of speech. So you said indirectly, yes. What does that mean, indirectly, yes?
Well, it means that they would meet certain metrics. I mean, already, for example, right, like Hassan is one of the biggest, I don't even know what to call him, a slop tube or whatever, on Twitch. It would already start encouraging people to look for something else. I mean, if you sign up to Twitch, one of the first things you see is Hassan. And it doesn't matter who you are, and that shouldn't be the case.
I know that. I'm just asking, what does it mean to say the government should indirectly do that?
Well, already by my first, so to say, there's a couple of strands of measures. Some would be considered more extreme by you, and we probably won't come to a consensus around that. But this first strand that I was suggesting in terms of depolarizing views already, I mean, certainly in the case of Hassan, he's going to be deprioritized because there's a strong polarization around his views, and then viewers would get alternative views. So already, indirectly, through those measures, he's going to be deprioritized.
Wait, you mentioned polarization. Is polarization going to be something that's used to deprioritize? Right.
Yeah, but that's my whole point, and it goes back to the point you were making, Stormwolf, that human nature goes toward, it's confirmation bias.
Well, sure, but for me, polarization would be an attribute we'd want to, we want people to be engaging with polarizing content, because we want, I guess I'm confused, what, I guess 2 things. Is Hassan being deprioritized, and on what basis would that be? So I know, I might be asking the same question. I'm just trying to get some clarity here.
Well, there is other aspect in terms of the types of views he encourages.
Sure, I just want a simple answer to the question, though.
He said indirectly yes. So he's saying that he would change the algorithm a little bit, and then
the government. So,
but it would be a deprioritization.
He's saying, I think, as a result of neutral regulation, the effect would be it would have the effect of deprioritizing Hassan and all these other people. That's what he'd expect the effect would be. But we're asking whether the criteria shouldn't, because you were making an analogy between pollutants and speech. Well, in the case of pollutants, the government is saying this is the dangerous pollutant. You can't have this kind of thing at this level. And in the context of the speech, if we're going to make that analogy, wouldn't the government be making the as a criteria matter the determination as to the dangerousness of that speech specifically? That's why I don't understand this kind of like.
Well, it's not okay, but it's not. But I do agree. Well, there's another indirect aspect, which is that key pieces of misinformation, if they're picked up by certain creators, then yeah, they should be certainly discouraged from being on people's feeds. So I think this would apply to all the cases you gave.
Okay,
here.
how would it apply to Hassan specifically? What piece of information?
The government has designated as a criteria that views like Hassan's or speech that's evident by Hassan, that this is something that platforms are required to deprioritize in virtue of the beliefs expressed, correct?
You use the term here beliefs, and before you use the term opinion. But I mean, some of these
opinions,
things.
I'm using them interchangeably. Opinion, beliefs.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. But like some of these things are also factual issues, right? For example, I was banned off Hassan's channel because I was quoting Amnesty International, and he just disagreed with this information about how Hamas is treating Palestinians.
Banning. But like, why is that?
Yeah, well, I mean, he's certainly not.
I think Pisco, right? That's not really responsive. So you said that views like Hassan is something that, like, do you agree with that sense that views like Hassan's due to factual issues ought to be deprioritized?
Yeah, because he's contradicting issues of fact.
And by the government, correct?
Well, by this body, yeah.
I mean,
but I guess my question is, so how is this body, like, this body could be legislated to use certain fact checkers to decide that, correct?
Yes, and also the fact checkers, these platforms should have to pay for this themselves too.
Well, sure. What I was going to get at is, I feel like if we're saying that, like, this kind of ties back to the idea of, like, who determines what misinformation is, right? Like, when you talk about, like, Hassan should be banned for misinformation.
He's saying, I mean, okay, you guys have said it like 3 or 4 times. Yeah, he's saying the government would do it. There would be a department.
I'm saying,
on the basis of the expression of, like, and again, when I say the expression of statements of fact that you think are wrong, or his interpretation of those facts. So what is the criteria? It's because he said false things, or is it because he said wrong, evil things, or because he said things that are likely to cause bad results? Like, what is the criteria?
Well, they're all interrelated. They're all interrelated, but the criteria would be clearly misinformative information, and it'd be a number of strikes, of course, and even in the case of Hassan, I don't want to see Hassan wiped off the internet. I want him to be able to share his views, and also, there's a redemption arc there, right? In terms of him giving it could encourage him actually to talk about how the Palestinians.
If he drops the views he's currently giving, he will be re-promoted after a certain amount of time.
Yeah, exactly. There should be flexibility.
The question they're asking, and I think what they're trying to get at, and I'm curious too, is who gets to decide which of these views are so odious, so pollutant, that we must make sure that the algorithm deprioritizes anyone expressing these views.
Just to give an example, by the way.
He's saying, like, no, the answer is he's saying the government, right? He's saying there would be the department, things that are untrue.
So wait, so question. The official stance of the
yeah.
government right now is that Israel is not committing a genocide in Gaza, correct? Or, like, I don't know. Let's say that is the official stance.
That is the view of the government, yes.
Would Hassan be, now that is that a matter of fact? Is that a matter of opinion? And would Hassan be deprioritized for that?
For saying it is a genocide in contradiction to what the government says.
I mean, a better example would be, what has the U.S. done with COVID misinfo? I don't know.
Okay, that's an easier example and we can deal with that as well. Yeah. But let's deal with the genocide.
I think my example. I want to hear my example though, because I am curious about that one.
I don't actually have a problem with him calling it a genocide. There are.
The question was about a category. Is that of the category such that it could be viewed such that it would be in the realm of factual stuff, regardless of how you personally feel about it?
Well, it's a matter of his opinion in this case. I mean, and he could refer to fairly authoritative figures who would agree with him in this case. The point is, it's not just on these individual things. Going back to context, we all agree the importance of context and language. Now, I was saying how important it was for the platforms, but even as a creator, you understand the context in which you put your words and your concepts. And the fact that he's not looking at a broader range of cases and the way in which he discusses the whole Israel-Palestine thing and then completely forgets about Hamas, right? or the fact he dismisses the Ukraine case.
Sure.
You can,
Would he? Okay. Well, let's ask that directly. Would he be deprioritized for being pro-Hamas?
I think that could
Or
that's
at least
more
Hamas
a serious. Well, Hamas. I think, as I say, you have to
There's
look at the
nothing
sum
more
total.
opinion than that. That's why the question is so good from because it's a question of values, right? If you have the value of that it's worth it ethically to at least abide by Hamas in the context of the greater conflict, in what sense is that quote unquote misinformation? I think that the hard pill that we have to swallow is a lot of the most corrosive stuff from creators aren't like necessarily just factual errors. I mean, those are bad or whatever, but the expression of certain views cause issues. I mean, you pointed to, for example, this encouragement of incitement or whatever, or the acknowledgement regarding the riots, I think, that occurred in Belfast or something like that. A lot of that is, some of it is factual misinformation, granted, but a lot of the negative stuff is pure opinion.
Also,
Yeah,
I'll be right
and-
back. I can still hear you guys. Just saying that real quick.
Yeah.
I mean, I also think some of this stuff you can measure the effects of these things and kind of the aggression that it can encourage in terms of especially on X, because a lot of people will then write something, so you can see what they're writing after having read something, which is a little easier than a platform like YouTube. You can then have metrics in terms of the extremist effect that content has, and in that sense, just the overall effect should play a role in not recommending something. And by doing so, it also feeds into this idea that you're not going to impassion someone so much towards an extreme. And there's going to be a void there that gets filled by other content, which has other perspectives, and therefore starts to bring down the temperature of some of these issues. For example, this wasn't the Belfast case. There's so many of them, sadly, in the UK. This was a refugee centre on mainland Britain. But nevertheless, yeah, Belfast is another case. It's a good example.
Yeah, but that's assuming, just real quick, that's assuming that the measures employed by the government are prioritizing quote unquote non-extremist views, right? So they, even assuming that, and this is why I was making the distinction between effectiveness and whether or not it's desirable, it could be effective at shutting down some views, but that the views that it promotes, that is to say the government is promoting views that are extremist. And so what about this system, as applied and given the track record of leaders that we have across these various different countries, would stand to reason that like what is going to be promoted are rational takes, are non-extremist takes. I'm not so sure, like, why are we convinced of that?
When I come into power, everyone who doesn't want to make me king is an extremist, and their views will be deprioritized. I'm just saying. I will absolutely appoint people to the position of this council or whatever. This
already exists. He's called Elon Musk. We have someone doing this already. Like we're talking about a lesser evil here, and of course there's risks involved. But the risks are so much less than what we
disagree with Elon Musk, he can't send police to my house to arrest me.
Well,
okay.
I mean, he's saying there.
Also, wait. Also, I don't know if I would.
What I'm saying is,
I guess
like,
this
it's
is
not a criminal thing. I could be deprioritized.
But I don't agree with this either, Wick.
That would criminalize it
Wait, I
if
also
social media companies broke those laws.
Oh, well, yeah, but exactly. But you're talking about your house for your views. In fact,
No, I'm saying when I become president of the United States eventually.
I don't think the implication would apply to.
Well, that's a different law. Of course, they can pass
Wait.
anything. So that's something completely different from what I'm suggesting. So that you can imagine anything that they want to pass when they get into power.
Maybe I'm
So
wrong.
No.
It sounds like
hold on,
ReasonRiffs
stop.
is saying.
Please
Wait.
don't
I'm
hold
going
on.
to clarify.
Let me address
Because
that real quick.
ReasonRiffs is saying.
Just real quick. No, the concern is that these laws done by this board that you are proposing, they will have to have appointees that make these decisions. The people who, again, are going to appoint these people, I assume, are legislators, correct?
Potentially indirectly, but effectively, yes.
Effectively,
Wait,
yes.
I don't understand. Wait, effectively, indirectly, it won't be legislators creating the criteria for.
His point is there's going to be an independent body, but that independent body is
enforce
established
it.
by the legislature. But
Yeah,
it's
okay,
established by the
so-
legislature.
Yes.
But the
That's what he's
criteria
saying
is established by law and enforced by this independent agency or whatever, right?
Yeah, I mean, like the BBC in the UK is adjacent to the government. It's definitely been affected by the government over the years. I'm not going to deny that. But it's not like they can just choose tomorrow who's running the BBC, right?
Sure, but it's still a.
What are you asking?
I think the point he was getting at though is
I'm not taking an issue with public ownership. Like I think I offered as one of the things that I would be okay with the government creating some sort of public platform where it controls the channels and instrumentalities and imposes stuff as alternatives to the monopolies and the corrupt actors. And if we have a bad leader, right, he's gonna fuck with that platform. But we're leaving plenty of instrumentalities available, private actors that the government isn't able to get their hands into. Now, as it happens now, we have some pretty shitty convergence of interests and agency capture, and Elon Musk and Trump are like aligned, and so a lot of the corporate interests are aligned with Trump. That's its own issue for sure, but I think it's made exponentially worse if the government has additional sets of leverage, which every time we've given, at least in the American context, maybe it's different in the UK, and we should talk about that if there's a reason to distinguish between countries, but at least in the American context, every time that leverage exists, then he uses it to try to get more concessions and more acquiescence from private actors, sometimes even in ridiculous examples like the private universities, or with respect to their grants and stuff, or with respect to law firms, right? So that's why I'm concerned. I mean, we just have had this demonstration of what centralization of authority can do, and I'm concerned about the government overreach there.
Well, I mean, just to address what Wick was pointing out, and maybe there's a misunderstanding as to what my answer was there. In the UK, I think it's 2003 law in terms of hate speech. People are having their doors knocked on for making aggressive and hateful statements on X right now. And I frankly don't. I just think it's ineffective, and I don't agree with this kind of thing. And it would actually be replacing this type of thing if they were just not going viral in the first place with their comments. And so then the individuals would have more protections, actually, or at least there was less law that can be applied against them when there's a bad actor, or if there's ever a bad actor in government. Ultimately, we're trying to prevent a bad actor getting into government, right? So you've got to also remember that this is going to reduce the likelihood of there being the bad actor in the first place.
So I appreciate that. I appreciate that. But it does
you're saying that the speech police already exist. So like this is
I know.
I
I
appreciate
in the UK, yeah.
I appreciate the notion that this is trying to stop bad actors from getting in. But the truth of the matter is that bad actors can get in, and the fear is what happens when they get in. Even with this, bad actors have risen without this type of social media before, right? I agree that it can enable it in some ways, but it's not like it's the sole cause, which means if a bad actor ever does get in, now we're in some really dangerous territory.
But if there's a bad actor, they're going to do whatever they want to do anyway, and they'll find ways of doing it.
Hold on, that's not true. Well, there's a lot of things that Trump wants to do, but he cannot do because of the systemic structures and infrastructure and institutions that we have in place. It is, to some extent,
for example,
checking him. What you're...
I want to... Sorry, my bad.
Oh, yeah. What you are advocating for is reducing, right, or even worse, perhaps, creating a weapon which is intended to be used against bad actors. But once a bad actor gets into place, that weapon now exists, and institutional protections are far, far less, and it's far, far more likely that they will be successful in their actions. Like if this,
look at the
weapon already exists. The weapon already exists. You guys are just upset now. Sure, because it's the same thing I was saying before. It's like 20 people control the algorithm right now, and it is already used in this way. It could be. And you have no way of
stopping. But you're asking to criminalize certain things.
Or maybe not criminalize, but penalties, or whatever. Right? Same different government regulation.
Fine.
But like,
yeah,
let's address that, right? So
I'll get
give
it to Pisco. Give it to Pisco. Then
you've identified an issue, Stale. Like they already control a bunch of stuff. Yeah, a lot of that is problematic to us. This doesn't change that. How does this change that? And really think about it in the context of Germany, for example, where there are more tough speech laws. Look at AfD. They're ahead in the polls. Look at all these like semi-authoritarian states where these kinds of
things are bad, but we all agree on this.
But you need to make the case that this is going to actually make things better and not worse.
Because I would make the case this can actually make things worse, right? This is what I brought up with the COVID misinformation stuff before, right? And this is why I think a lot of populism is rising. People, again, whether or not it is true, had the perception that the governments were censoring COVID information. It drew more attention to it, and people began becoming more steadfast in these beliefs, becoming more extreme in their doubt. Their doubt went from, well, I'm not super sure, to vaccines cause autism, right? And what this does is it enables that, and then it also keeps them in their hug boxes because they don't feel like they should leave, because they don't feel like they can leave. And what that does is it further insulates these ideas to become more and more extreme. More people will, and it's harder to pull those people out of those ideas, and it can funnel people into this populism rise. It's why AfD is rising in Germany. It's why we've seen this populism rise in both on the left and the right.
Isn't
in our
reform
own country.
like on the rise in UK?
Well, thankfully, they're fragmenting
My
into
point is,
multiple
my point is
far-right
the
parties. But
perception of this has done that. Imagine what the actual implementation of this will do.
no, but I mean, this is we're hypothesizing over something that's been done in studies. I mean, let's say there's a study this year. Let me just read what I mean, their simple
For
conclusion.
sure. If there's studies on this, I'd
Overall,
love to
we
hear them.
conclude that social media feed algorithms can play an important role in shaping political opinions and online behavior.
Yeah, we don't dispute
right?
that.
Wait,
Why
that's
not
Okay,
just
you
get
don't
rid of the
dispute that.
automatic algorithm?
wait, that doesn't
So
contradict
you're
what I'm
just saying
saying, right?
that algorithms are influential. I mean, no, I don't dispute that.
But
that's
they're
not
shaped
what
by
we're here to debate.
two things right now. Firstly, is the incentive to keep people engaged because it makes them money, right?
Sure.
Which literally is
Granted.
polarizing views, right?
Granted.
Which could be
Sure,
legislated.
hold on,
The other
granted.
thing
Well,
is,
what does that have to do with what we're talking about?
well, look at America. I'm sorry, there is a lot that Trump has done. I mean, it's no coincidence that Musk owns X, right? Who now is running CNN? I mean, look at other legacy media as well. The whole of America's being bought up. This
I don't
is
understand why. But I don't understand why that's a point in your favor. If anything, that's a point in our favor. It shows how corruptible our government is, how much they're entrenched with these interests of these social media companies, and how dangerous it is to give them even more control.
Yeah, but the extra control for them would be nothing.
Wait, with the CNN thing, remember what Pisco said at the start about like antitrust laws? That's probably more effective at combating this.
There's more than just antitrust
agree.
laws, because you guys gave like mealy-mouthed examples, which imply like, okay, what if Instagram wasn't controlled by Facebook? That would solve anything. I think the problem isn't that there's.
Sorry, I'm gonna take you through that.
Sure.
What name one mealy-mouthed example we used?
Well,
What's a mealy-mouthed example?
It seems like when you're saying like antitrust, like how many. By antitrust, do you mean that there's going to be thousands of companies, or do you mean like there's going to be 10 instead of 5?
No, I think that it wouldn't result in thousands of companies, but it would at least it probably would operate to stop a merger between Warner Brothers Discovery and Paramount or whatever this recent one was. It would stop some of these big high ticket billion-dollar mergers, and those are relevant. Yeah, I'm not saying that it will result in thousands of social media companies. I'm not even sure if thousands of social media companies is a desirable thing, right? In some sense, right? There is some universality desires to social media. I'm not sure that it's socially efficient to have thousands of social media companies of that scale, but I do think that it will address some of the concerns, if anything, right? But okay, why is that mealy mouth? Why is saying, hey, maybe an avenue to address at least some of this is through antitrust? Is it perfect?
Because
No.
at the end of the day, it's still mostly controlled by the same people, right? So I mean, just like when 5 years ago, like all the social media companies at the same time just like banned a bunch of conservatives, it's the same people is the problem. And so
Sure,
there
but
needs to be
the
more
issue
than
is
just
now
like
you're asking
technos.
from like a private company from going to do that to government regulating all social media companies. Like,
Well, there's a better solution. Okay, why not just say like, yeah, I'm just saying like, why not just make these guys common carriers? Why not just go all the way? Like
What do you mean by that? So let's talk about that.
Sure.
What do you mean when you say common carrier? Spell that out, and what
Sure.
would it mean
So-
to treat them like a common carrier?
All of the technology that it takes to run Twitter and YouTube would be open source, and anybody can run it and connect to the
Okay.
Twitter network.
That's
just
not,
like there has.
That's not common carrier, but fair. Common carrier is like something where you're required to provide service to everyone because you're a common
Yeah.
carrier.
So the underlying
you can't
infrastructure.
discriminate based on all the stuff, right?
Because usually
Exactly.
the limitations, limitations there have to do with like physical, like you can't build dozens of cables, right? And the infrastructure, like they crowd out other potential.
You can't build dozens of YouTubes
physical
either.
infrastructures.
You
say that you say that, but there was a robust creation of alternative networks and platforms in the aftermath of what was seen by many as too odious. Did it stop Nick Fuentes? Did it stop Rumble from having a lot of people? Yeah, maybe it deprioritized some other misinformation, but it seems like you acknowledge we're in a bad spot.
I would say making a telephone network is easier, right? I mean, technically, I can make a telephone network right here. I could just hook up a telephone line. That's a telephone network, right?
Okay,
I would say, yeah.
But before we do the
easier.
comparison, let's just talk about what are the implications of treating them this way? And so one implication you said is you reveal all of their trade secrets, or what is it? What do you reveal? What are you revealing? The algorithm, the code for it?
I'm saying that there should be some sort of universal front end, or that is ahead of all this stuff. So there's the back end that sends all the tweets or whatever, and anybody Just like, it's not that hard to make a telephone company or like connect to the telephone network. There should be a standard for sending tweets or social media posts that could decentralize in a decentralized way, connects to all the people who want to send the tweets to anybody, just like email.
Yeah,
Like,
so
email's
let's assume that happens, right? Common carriers are, have even less control over their platforms and over like the usage of their technologies and the ISPs than these social media companies do. So if you're treating them like common carriers, how would they be able to exercise the kind of discretion that you think is necessary to combat this issue? I think it's like the opposite of what you would want to argue for.
because there would be algorithms on top of that, and the idea would be you make everybody liable for the you make everybody liable for the algorithms. So just like
Everybody liable for the algorithms. What do you mean?
yes, so
please?
like the New York Times would be on Twitter, right? So if the New York Times has their own central, this is my social media algorithm, right? They would have that, or you would have your locally controlled algorithm.
Okay, so everyone is controlling their own algorithm. Okay, that's what you mean.
Oh,
Yeah,
so you're
or
saying
you
that
can
I can
subscribe
make.
to these.
So let's say I'm like as normal. If I want to make an algorithm that you can subscribe to, like opt in like a subreddit kind of. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly, yeah. But you're liable for it, yeah.
but the
I
more
can't-
custom-
liable. What do you mean by
customization-
liable?
Yeah, by liable, do you just mean you have the control over it, or do you mean like
No,
civilly
you're-
liable for something?
I mean, it's your speech. So just like how a newspaper is liable for everything on the
Yeah, New
newspaper.
York Times is liable for their
Exactly.
social media posts. People have been sued successfully over their social media posts.
Yeah,
It's not the corporation, but like presumably,
But the
if you're
algorithm,
treating
yeah.
all these algorithms, or sorry, the social media companies as common carriers, you're basically restricting the amount that they can have of like editorial discretion and control. Why would it make sense to force them to do things and to basically not discriminate, right? Because that's the whole common carrier
Because
thing.
I'm
is
saying
you can't
that
discriminate.
exactly,
But
yeah.
the evil that you're pointing to, this is the basic contradiction that I find, and maybe you can resolve it still. I'm not saying you can't. The basic contradiction I'm identifying and what you're proposing is the problem identified is lack of discretion, lack of editorial input by these algorithms in a way that's beneficial to society. Common carrier makes you have less editorial and discretionary control over what is being provided through these networks. And so how does increasing the level of decreasing the level of discretion, decreasing the level of editorial control, address the problem of a lack of editorial control and a lack of discretion?
Well,
You
yeah,
understand that?
just
Sure,
for clarity,
because-
it sounds like
because
what you're
the
saying is
problem-
wait, one thing for clarity.
Sure.
Thing for clarity. It sounds like what you're saying is like, yeah, this puts the onus, not like how is it shifting the onus from the individual
Because
creators or individual posters?
instead of one or two companies having that editorial control, like all the hard stuff, all the high capital and
Was the common carrier thing.
Sure,
This is all like
I
a
don't
conservative
have a
psyop.
problem.
Wait,
Sure,
wait,
I don't
so
have
wait,
a
wait,
problem
stop,
with them
wait, wait,
making
you're
their own
saying is
networks.
this-
I have
this
a
stops
problem with
the
them taking. Yeah, so the problem that I have isn't that conservatives can't make a social network, or it isn't. That's not the problem. The problem is that they took over X, right? So I don't want them taking over that's the problem, is that one or two people can take over the Omega algorithm. It's not that we can spin up our no one very easily. That would be great if everybody could spin up their own social media companies and there could be thousands of them. But the problem here is if there's one that controls everybody.
But
Yeah,
see,
but
this
the
creates the
more you make them a
insulated
common carrier,
algorithm thing that we. Well, this creates the insulated algorithm thing that we were critiquing earlier. No, where like now everyone is like arguably worse because people have to opt into algorithms and then they're in those algorithms, right? And I'm confused how this still just doesn't like. I'm like you're saying it doesn't control the algorithm, but if anything, yeah, because if your issue is the algorithm, it creates a more tailored algorithm and to even further onus off of the social media companies. Also, wouldn't social media companies be required? Because in Section 230, it says something about like how they're not moderation doesn't equal endorsement. I think that would probably go away if they're common carriers, and
They would have to host
Yeah.
a bunch of
Yeah, they have
shitty
to-
stuff, right?
But
Yeah,
that-
sure.
but
So
that-
but that's the opposite of the problem you're identifying, right? The problem that you're identifying has to do with like lack of moderation and lack of discretion and irresponsibility.
No. The problem that
Okay, so what-
I'm saying the
alright.
problem is that one company has that power, right? One or two companies have that power. It's not that it's that it's all centralized in one place. That's the issue.
Maybe I'm misinterpreting. Pisco, I actually think you're wrong. It doesn't. In fact, I think it puts more moderation ability, but I think it's actually leads to such a chilling effect on free speech that it could be bad.
Then we need to clarify. We just need to clarify the meaning here, guys, because
Because
there's
here's
clearly
my understanding is
disconnect.
because it sounds like you're.
Let's focus only on what the meaning of these things are. So I understand a common carrier to be something like a telephone company or these kinds of systems where there's high costs, a startup cost to implementing them, and where there's crowding out of situations. And the result of being designated as such is that you have less discretion to discriminate, right? ISPs can't say Republicans can't use the internet because they're fucking it up. Phone companies can't tell you that you're not allowed to use their services to do the, like, if you're a Republican or something. There are limits on the amount of discretion you're able to implement, and in return for that, you get the benefit of the monopoly, right? That seems to be the bargain at stake in the common carrier situation. Is that what other people understand, or is there a mismatch here, miscommunication?
That's when we make common carrier, so that stops what you were saying you wanted, right? Because that does stop more algorithms. That does stop like algorithmic control, or like that does stop the problem of like being able to stop these like controlled algorithms, right?
It makes it so there's not one. It means instead of there being one or two algorithms, it means that there's thousands.
Wait, no, that's the opposite. You understand, like, with common carrier.
Okay, I think I can bring this
one, right? It's
hold on.
one
I think
thing.
I can bring this down. Hold on, please. He's saying is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that instead of the company itself controlling the algorithm, they would be a common carrier, so they could not do that, or would be very restricted in doing that, but it would allow for personal, private algorithms to be applied to this company. So again, if you subscribe to the New York Times algorithm, then that would go. And the company itself couldn't mess with that, but the private owners or the private creators of whatever algorithm could.
Yeah, so why doesn't that just reproduce the issue, right? Because
I must be honest, I'm a bit skeptical.
It doesn't reproduce the issue because now there's not, instead of there being one, there's a bunch, right? The problem here is that everybody subscribes to this Omega algorithm that nobody has any control over, and it's like the problem isn't that you can't have editorial
but the user
control.
would want to go to the one that has the most, and then it snowballs again. That's why we're on X. It's not because we like Musk. It's because most people are on there, right? So if the user gets to decide, they'll end up creating again one of the big platforms, and the other ones will shrink away. So I think if as long as you allow users to choose which platform they decide to go onto, then you'll get this inhomogeneous distribution of platform sizes. So
I still don't understand how.
But I do understand the idea. The idea is to break up the risk, right? Because it's a bit like a financial markets with all the money concentrated in a few businesses. It's the same thing with ideas and then the power that those businesses have. And it's the same thing in terms of the online space. So I understand the motivation, but I do think there's a real risk there that users will just go, hey, which is the biggest? Which can I? Oh, most of my friends are, and then you go towards that. Right?
My other question is, because I think there's two things. I think Stale's been talking about the power that oligarchs have over the social media companies. But I think you, ReasonRiff, were talking about and maybe these go hand in hand, but I think in this instance they contradict each other, where you were talking about the installation of algorithms. I think what Stale's proposing worsens this problem. And I think the problem with oligarchs controlling their algorithm is that they're controlling their algorithm. But more than anything, I think how they're using it right now is in a way to keep us insulated from each other. And that's the criticism. But this seems to just further that even worse. Because like ReasonRiff says, they're going to go to wherever algorithms that are the most popular or that they agree with the most, and then they just stay there. And it's even harder to break that containment zone now. I mean, maybe you think that's maybe you think that's better than the kind of status quo. I don't see how it is. I think it's actually worse.
I mean, you can't prevent small communities from forming. It's just the problem is when these small communities that are insane, I feel like, break out of the containment zone and like take over major places.
So you want to keep them in containment zones?
I would rather Stormfront stay on Stormfront instead of being on Twitter. Right? Like if they were over there.
What do you say to because there's been studies on this that yes, it does reduce the reach of extremist groups to kind of quarantine them off, but they tend to become more extreme in their quarantine zone, and it does lead to them performing violent acts more often.
With Stormfront specifically, there's this book called Rising Out of Hatred, and I forget the name of it. Basically, it was the son of the person who was like in charge of Stormfront and how he broke out of his radicalization. And one of the things he talked about was it wasn't people isolating him that fixed it. It wasn't people him being contained in Stormfront that fixed him. It was someone who took the time to actually engage with him. And this is where I got to with the healthy discussion, the free speech with minimal discussion, and the lack of free speech. This containment zone idea, either it leads to a suppression of free speech, or we have this containment zone idea. But it seems like what we're doing is we're heightening the containment zone, which we all seem to think is bad.
You're arguing almost identically for one of the measures that I'm proposing, which is the depolarization legislation around algorithms. And this would even be biased towards a political view. There's nothing a government that gets in power could actually do about this. It would simply mean that people's feed.
Well, the issue is like imposing it to the government, and as this is where we're gonna loop a little bit here. So I don't know if we want to go back down that. It was the implementation method that was my big concern, where you put the power in the government. Remember, that was the concern. Where like, what is being deprioritized? How is it being deprioritized?
Well, be very okay. What? Let me clarify. I didn't feel like I really clarified myself.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I would love to hear that more. Yeah.
So I mean, legislation would be very, very general that the government could put forward, and then the body itself would decide more of the details and be more dynamic as to what exactly was working and following an evidence-based approach. It's going back to national banks. I don't think Trump has decided the interest rate in the Federal Reserve since he's got out. He'd like to, right? But he hasn't got that power.
That's because Jerome Powell has been in control, and I think with Jerome Powell out, there's a fear that this next
but
is going to.
Yeah, it's the same with this body, right? Exactly, it's the same parallel with this body I'm suggesting, and I think Wick's concern. I really appreciate and admire, the cautiousness approaching this, but it's not a binary choice, right? We already agree that some censorship is required. We arguably agree that censorship as a term, as a concept, is a little bit vague here because of the zero-sum nature of what goes on people's feeds anyway. So these measures are pretty tepid, and no government coming into power can really go, right, I'm going to decide to ban everything. If he does what they do, they're going to do it through other means, and illegal means probably, right? Or just breaking the rules anyway, which is what they're going to do if they get into power. So this measure I suggested is really pretty tepid in terms of like a bad actor being able to take control over it. And that's the whole point, right?
I don't address that first. The question of first of who decides on independent agency front. So in America, this is unless we, further to the debates on court expansion and that kind of stuff, unless we change the composition of the court or the court changes, they're not open for business to accept new independent agencies. They have destroyed the doctrine of Humphrey's executor and the independent agency, and basically have carved out a rule, a sui generis rule for the Federal Reserve. And it's only by dint of that one exception that is totally bullshit and arbitrary to just say the Federal Reserve is just different, bro, that we have any arguably independent agency left in this country whatsoever. I mean, just look at, for example, the FTC and the Federal Election Commission and any number of quote unquote independent agencies that have been totally politicized by the administration. So just in a practicality sense, this kind of thing is difficult in America. Maybe it's easier abroad or whatever. But even granting it, right? I think that there's perhaps an expertise that I'm willing to trust for the government when it comes to pollution, when it comes to medicine and stuff. I'm not so sure that I want to leave the questions of which speech should be censored to the discretion of experts that are even less attuned to democratic legitimacy than our politicians. So I'm not sure that I'm comfortable with that idea.
Well, especially because they have such a vested interest in preventing government criticism and preventing imagine this current Republican body dictating what could be banned or not in Congress.
Yeah, but that's not what I'm even suggesting. And firstly, and secondly, as I say, there were multiple strands to my point. There's one about extremist views. But you wouldn't even have to, okay, you don't like that? Okay, don't have that part then. But at least the depolarization process, that's got nothing to do with what the views are. It just means that you get recommended things you frankly don't want to see. And you probably engage less, and they'll probably make less profit. But that's just the way it is. At least
I want to ask the question. Is Destiny extremist?
Well, he isn't to me. I mean, it's these anti-extremists.
Well, that's the point, right? He isn't.
Right. If you ask a Charlie Kirk fan, if you ask
sure, but following my algorithm, right? I go onto YouTube. I wouldn't be recommended Destiny. I would be recommended someone I disagreed with. This is my first strand.
Please stop. Stop avoiding it. The question is, the independent agencies, right? Polite society. A lot of them, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your view, right? Let's not get into the actual personalities. View Destiny as an extremist on some things, whether it's the Charlie Kirk comments or whether it's what his presence on Twitch. He's been demonetized by YouTube. Those things I don't agree with, right? So I'm not saying that he is an extremist on all these things. What I'm saying is I don't trust on issues of speech and censorship the powers that be, right? And you shouldn't either when it comes to these speech-related issues.
How about
but as I say,
what about foreign enemies? right? So like I think that a lot of foreign enemy nations are messing our social media up a lot, and I feel like that's a lot easier for the government to make a judgment on like, yes, we can detect that these IPs are from this data center over there, and that's controlled by an enemy nation. Maybe the government could work more with social media companies to find who these people are and ban the foreign enemy national terrorists or whatever.
Okay, if you go for the foreign stuff, right? There's categorical exceptions to like foreign type speech. Foreign speech isn't protected in like American countries, and so maybe there's something to be said about preventing foreign access or for foreign actors and stuff. And there are, by the way, legislative regimes already when you come to registration, FAR related stuff, election related stuff, and so yeah, maybe we have some room there, but that's not what we're talking about here, right?
Or
a
like
lot of the
just-
issues though
yeah.
is like domestic extremists domestically, or not even extremists, frankly. The country is super fucking polarized, and something like 30+% of the country is in a cult of personality to Trump. We just need to accept that fact that MAGA is not a fringe movement. It is the mainstream Republican movement, and they suck, the movement, not everyone in it.
But this
Also,
was
just one thing, like with the foreign thing, it might make sense to like ban bots, because like I do think there's a huge issue with Twitter right now, like mass bots from like other countries trying to like feed like information. I don't know like how much, like, yeah, with what Pisco was saying, the foreign people also maybe, but like I don't know if that's how much of that is what we're talking about here.
I mean, I would argue. My last comment on that is I think that they punch above their weight. I think that it might be the case that a lot of our polarization and extremism, maybe it's exacerbated very significantly by foreign kind of adversaries, right? And then things aren't as extreme as you might think, right? Because I know the Russian government was doing that. They were like supporting Black Lives Matter as well as Nazis at the same time just kind of get people to fight.
And just to be crystal clear, I'm proposing 3 different measures, one of which I think we'll probably agree on. But the extremist thing was not part of the first measure. The first measure is just about depolarization. It's not about whether views are strict.
Let's try to understand it.
Can you just say all 3 and then we can go one by one? Just so
Okay. Firstly, there's depolarization, right? So there's you can have an influence in the algorithm in terms of people being recommended things they probably don't want to see. Maybe they want to see a little bit. They'll figure out whichever encourages people to have less polarized views. Secondly, is more extremist content that's radicalizing people with a longer term perspective on the damage it causes. Right, and then we've got to discuss what long-term means. And the third thing is like an immediate threat, right? When someone is like the Jan 6 stuff and around what Trump was posting.
Okay, so let's address each of these categories, right? So you have 3 categories of speech covered content that should inform the criterion decision on whatever reform we're talking about. Understood it.
Yeah, there's the same body dealing with these 3 things, right? So I mean, but they're 3 different things, yeah.
Yeah, so to put it simply, it's some notion of depolarization, some notion of extremism, and some notion of immediate threat. Immediate threat, let's not talk about that. That's already unprotected, right? When we're talking about incidents related to harassment or true threats, these kinds of things are unprotected speech. Granted, the government should be free to regulate that kind of stuff, 100%. So, but on the other 2, here's where we have issues. Number 1 is on a meaning. I don't actually know what it means to prioritize depolarizing content, number 1. And number 2, I don't know that it's desirable, that depolarization is desirable. I want to polarize people against Republicans right now, given the threat of Trump. And I don't know, is there some kind of neutral sense of depolarization, and why, right? Like, why would we promote cucks like Wick, just kidding, but like enlightened centrist type, more centristy people, when I want to activate a higher consciousness within Democrats to be more polarized against MAGA Republicans. So I'm not sure that I even agree with that, even if I did understand it. So let's deal with that first, and then we go to extremism.
I'm also curious about the practicality of it, because we all seem to acknowledge that there isn't a neutral.
Give it a minute. I want him to address Pisco's argument here.
So there's 2 aspects of that. The first is of understanding what it would mean to promote depolarizing content. What is depolarizing content? And second, the desire.
Well, it's not the content itself.
Just real quick, for clarifying question for me: would this only apply to politics, or would like say I only want to see 40K stuff on my stream? I don't fucking care about these other games. I'm a 40K fan. I only want to see 40K content. Would the algorithm now be required to promote My Little Pony to me?
I'm sorry, Wick, you're going to see My Little Pony content. No, I think that's what.
If you guys want to disagree with it, that's fine. But I don't think this is actually hard to solve, right? I mean,
No,
I
I
feel like
want
AI
an answer
can
to my
solve it.
question first, but then we can.
No, as I
get
said
to-
about the factual and entertainment type stuff, there needs to be a line drawn there, and like entertainment stuff, just go off and I mean, see your 40K or the
Well,
Age of
that's the
Sigma,
problem,
but-
though, right? Because a lot
Okay,
of
then
the
a lot of the normative force behind this goes away because a lot of the alleged harmful effects don't have to do with politics. They have to do with things like
No, but
like culture wars, right?
self-awareness, culture stuff, and
Which are
self-esteem
tangentially related
and
to politics, right? Like if
Yeah.
I'm talking about like LGBTQ issues, is that politics? Like,
no,
and
but I'm not just talking about politics. I'm talking about factual stuff, right? Like 40K.
no, I
as much
understand
as
the factual stuff, but you're about the entertainment. I'm kind of harping on the entertainment here. Like with the entertainment stuff, you're saying like that might be like there's a line, but I'm curious like what would we define as like related to politics where it needs to be depolarized and what wouldn't it, right? So I bring up like stuff. I brought up stuff like LGBTQ stuff, but even in games, right? Like Asmongold talking about culture war stuff related to games. Well, that's tied to politics, but is it really politics? Like you know what I'm saying? Like it's a weird definition there.
Yeah, I mean, there would have to be a line drawn, just like there is in terms of environmental regulation. Like we agree that certain lines just have to be drawn at some point. And something like this would actually be relatively easy in terms of like agreeing, okay,
we're
look,
talking about
I
line.
don't agree. It's
Wait,
not
wait,
a
wait,
Sorties
wait, please,
paradox.
can I-
There's a conceptual issue here, which Wick and Storm. I want to call you Stormfront, but your name's not Stormfront. That's the name of the radical group.
For
right?
reference,
Holy crap.
I hang out at Wix server. Wix admin was like naming me that earlier.
Okay, got it. All right, understood it. There's a conceptual issue. It's not just a line drawing issue, right? What does it mean to depolarize with respect to entertainment? What does it mean to depolarize with respect to, ads? What does it mean to depolarize with respect to, drama? So it's not just a line drawing issue.
No, sure, it's a heat
conceptual
paradox.
issue,
You,
but
you,
what
you
is
are right. But you have these paradoxes in sciences as well, and environmental regulation.
Well,
I mean,
what I brought up wasn't even a line thing. Mine was a classification issue, right?
It's a concept issue. What do you
Yeah,
mean
it's like what
by
counts as things that we
depolarizing
want to
that
like.
stuff?
Let's say you say
I mean,
we
I
want
can,
to.
I
Let's
can give an
start.
answer, right? So, like,
Yeah, forward.
whatever the value is on how much it makes people upset, it reduce. Okay, determining if something will make people upset or is polarizing. This isn't like a hard thing anymore. Like you can come up with crazy
we're not
examples.
asking, we're
We
not
don't
asking
understand
what
what it
makes you
is
polarized.
still.
We're asking
Okay.
what we are trying to depolarize.
What
Are we
is
trying to just
depolarization with respect to? So I understand polarity when it comes to Wait, stop. I understand polarity when it comes to politics. There's these two poles of thought. There's the Democrats and the Republicans, and so things that are depolarized would be like making them more gel together or something. I don't understand that concept as applied to like media and entertainment and other things unrelated to politics. You need to get in my
I mean, you
head
understand it
what
because your
that means.
feed, like the way in which his feeds are working, they're looking at correlations between interests, right? And so when they say, "Oh wow, he really is like, he believes in climate change," so I get more climate change videos on my YouTube, right? That isn't a coincidence, and that can be viewed in terms of just a
Okay,
correlation
I have to be
between.
insistent. I don't understand.
Okay.
Define what you mean by polarization with respect to other things unrelated to politics, and I just need you to understand. Like,
Well,
explain that
I mean, to
concept
bring up
and nothing
advice, I
else
mean,
than that.
you can say everything's politics, but I mean, there's other factual stuff in which you can see polarizing interests or polarizing positions.
What do you mean
right?
by depolarization? I understand in the context of politics, but is there some broader notion of depolarization? I need to know.
Yes,
what you're talking about.
mathematically, in terms, okay, this is what would happen. We wouldn't like it particularly, but it's a good thing nevertheless, right? It means that sometimes we would get like a climate skeptic's view in our feeds because we already look for, and this goes back to something that Stormwolf was talking about before, that there's the active looking thing, which I don't think should be touched that much, and
What
there's
does
what we're
depolarization
given.
mean? You have to explain it. Sorry, I'm not getting it. What you're doing right now.
Okay,
is
your
what
feed is
depolarization
decided right now by correlations. Do you understand what a correlation is, right?
I understand correlation to be some tendency to coincide.
Yeah,
with some
okay,
other
and there's
thing.
there's a numerical correlation going in the background when you go on YouTube or any of these other
Okay,
platforms.
granted. I don't.
Right?
How does that help explain what polarization means in this context?
Well, the polarization of that happens through our feed is that we're given something that positively correlates with something you've seen before. And what I'm suggesting is that it should be a non-correlated or negatively correlated item or
I get
piece
what
of
he's getting
content that should be recommended to give the
So-
other
It's like
side
a
of the view.
fairness
But I
doctrine.
get what he's saying. He's
Right,
correct.
but a
Wait,
pure
he's trying to
polarization view
clarify.
on that would be like, like for every health misinformation that you read, you should get the good information. But also, wouldn't it also stand to reason that if you're getting like very sound, good information about medicine,
Yeah, we would get
depolarization
some
be
bad stuff
getting-
sometimes,
wait,
yeah.
Okay, so then why is it
Yeah.
virtuous to seek depolarization if that's what it means?
Because if the factual stuff is going to be more coherent, so when given both sides of the argument, people are going to be biased towards
So if
the
I'm
right argument.
pro-vaccine, then I would be the government would mandate I get anti-vax content in my feed.
We would get some really crappy
if that's what
content.
you want.
And I trust that we would all keep good views. It's the other side
Government
that
is forcing you to see anti-vax conspiracy. Like,
no, okay. Now you're putting words in my mouth.
Well, okay.
I asked you a question. You answered the question. What do you mean put words in your mouth? I asked you a question. This would happen. You said it
because
would.
the government doesn't decide that, but in practice, yeah. And it feeds back to a really important point that Stormwolf made it before about human nature going towards like this clustering, this just confirmation bias. And I believe that our views can be tested with nonsense that we'd get. It's the people that are believing the nonsense that would have some really coherent things put in front of them that would at some point break those and prevent it from spreading and happening in the first place.
You think this is actually virtuous? You think the idea of a pro-vaccine person being exposed to anti-vaccine is actually virtuous?
I believe we would all come out the other end going, we believe in vaccines still. Like that was a lot of
but your
rubbish.
point is maybe we find out that we were wrong. But your point is we would end up with some better reality. Is your point?
Because we all agree polarization is bad, and this would literally depolarize people's views.
I don't agree that polarization is inherently bad. If what you mean by polarization is just getting equal time for every view or for every positive correlation, you introduce a negative one. I don't think
it doesn't have to go to the other extreme either.
This is my next question. Like, is it like a 1-for-1? How would it work? Or is it like every now and then? Like, how does this necessarily work?
No, I mean that would be decided by the body, and I do think that needs to be like all of this stuff should be completely transparent. And as I say, the algorithms themselves should be it should be legislated. We get to see what the algorithms are behind this, and that's the only way we can see what these bodies would be enforcing. But there would have to be some dynamism in terms of how this is implemented, because in the end, it's the overall effect. And that's something that needs to be studied. I mean, these things are being studied, and we should follow the science and the studies on this.
So
and I want an evidence-led approach. I mean, like if the evidence is the evidence is already pointing towards these algorithms and how these algorithms controlled can have these influences, and I think we should make policy and government bodies based upon evidence rather than denying it.
Sure. My next question would be though, like, yes, you're talking about the correlation, but it's like like this is where we got into like the 4K thing. Is all correlation necessarily indicative of like polarization, right? Like like I have a lot of Pokemon stuff on my Twitter, right? If you couldn't tell from
but that's fictional. That's fine. Yeah, I mean,
that's fine. But then like there is sometimes when like politics enters Pokemon. So there was some controversy in some VGC tournament where people talking about this guy being.
It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be a lot better than it is now. You know, like it's not going to be perfect.
The guy was too smelly. He was going to all the tournaments, and he was like, just,
I don't know.
That, like,
but there was an incident where people were wearing MAGA hats to VGC stuff. Is that now not shown to me, or is that shown because it's still technically confirming my Pokemon stuff, right? Or is that now I guess like that's where it kind of gets to weird stuff, or do we not touch that for polarization? Like what's happening there? Because we
could be quite conservative about it. Let's be conservative about it and be really cautious in our approach, right? But it's still substantially better than what we have right now. So now we're talking about the fine lines, which is great. That's a conversation I also want to have. But we need to at least implement something along these lines. To at least make it once in a while, but that's better than never.
I'm happy. I'm happy to grant that this is. Let's say this is a good thing because I actually agree with you. You do want to try and break out of their bubble. The other issue, I think we kind of keep going back to this, is like who's implementing it and who has control over it. Yeah, I feel like there's no solution.
Before we move on, I do want to get through some of my super chats, make a little money, and you guys will again don't give a $50 answer to a $5 super chat, but let's go. Tier 2 member Audacity for 21 months. Wow. If we restrict speech too much, then I wouldn't be able to watch Storm lose debates to Kung Fu Joe, and that would make me sad. Well, thank you for the Tier 2 membership. 10 pounds from Freshly Exhumed. Pisco and Storm. These platforms don't just show you what you want to see. They show you what keeps you there the longest, and that's not the same thing.
I think we grant that,
I grant that that's a different thing, for sure. But like, I think the point that I was making is customization as a solution. If it is indeed a solution, I think it would require some kind of like self-reflection of one's desires and what a healthy appetite is, such that if one is actually self-reflecting on that, they're probably not as big of a issue in the first place. I think it's like
also just
an odd person that's like rethinking that.
Also, just a reference, I just popped in my head. I think Instagram has this feature now too, where you can customize your algorithm, like you can put in what it does. I don't know. It still ends up
I don't
showing me
use
stuff that like
Instagram, can't tell you.
it's like it hasn't had, like it doesn't really. I feel like I end up just seeing the same content because even as someone who like looks for other content, I'm mostly interacting with Instagram when I want to see content I just want to enjoy, right? So I'm not really getting like challenging and
last
new
thing,
content.
Last thing, even if they're not the exact same concept, these two things, which is to say what you want to see and what you spend most time seeing, right? I think there's a strong correlation between what you want to do and how much time you spend doing it, if able to, right? Like when you have free time on it, right? Not saying that it's perfectly 1-to-1, but if you've heard that phrase, if you wanted to, you would. Yeah, like if you're spending a ton of time on an issue, maybe it's not exactly what you want to see, but I think it's a decent proxy for what you want to see, and it's certainly the opposite of like what you don't want to see and what you avoid.
$2 from Fishy to say 676767 a lot times. Well, thank you for that. $10 from It's Fishy. Let's be honest here. I respect Pisco's vigor, and while we disagree on things, I know he's a patriot who argues with his heart. He's a good person. None of that matters, though, because he likes Chelsea. I don't know. Okay. $2 from Tesco Johnson, Wick L. Thank you for the $2. $5 from It's Fishy. Pisco isn't ready for Polis MGP 2028. That'll fix this. Okay.
What? Is that an AI thing?
Maybe MGT he meant?
MGP. Marjorie. No, I don't know what MGP is then. It's not Marjorie.
I have
Taylor.
no idea what that is. Maybe I'm stupid.
$5 from Sexy Jedi. Social media algos are the one ring. No one can have that power. Must cast it into Mount Doom, aka outlaw the algorithms. Can't give the ring to either governments or corporations.
I don't know. I think social media platforms have been like
algorithms.
That's incoherent to be clear for the social media. Like it just doesn't really make sense with how they kind of need algorithms to work.
J Ray for $5. Unrelated. Wick, how many more debate L's, Pisco and Josiah W's will you need to watch or take before you change your mind on court backing? We'll tell you what. Give me 50
We're
more
working on
bucks
it.
and
We're
I'll
working
tell
on
you
it.
the number. I'll give you a number.
We're working on it.
Wait, after $50, he'll tell you the number you need to pay him to change his mind.
Yes,
by the way,
Toddy Girl for £3. Just an emoji. Thank you for that. $5 from Lawson Harrison. Targeting foreign influence content would disproportionately affect the far left and most of the right.
I mean, perhaps. I don't doubt that there's a ton of like influence from Qatar and Iranian media organizations and Israel and but like Russia and shit. So yeah, I mean, like
it's growing. It's a growing problem.
Yeah, sure. If you have a tailored rule related to foreign actors, I think that's at least it's not. It's with respect to people who don't have any free First Amendment rights, at least in the context of the United States. And there's a very clear line there. It's like, are you a foreign actor or are you not? Right?
Well, then I wouldn't be able to talk to you right now, would I? So, because I wouldn't be.
Well,
I think there's a difference in like.
It could be an enemy nation, like on the terrorist list.
You're asking me what I desire, right? Like I frankly want to be able to communicate with people from other countries and stuff like that. Maybe it can be limited to foreign states or people who are promoting foreign states, but we already have kind of regimes for that. Of like FARA and stuff like that. Maybe you want something a little bit more expansive. That's fine, but at least that's like in my view, a workable rule. A rule that doesn't like engender a bunch of discretion calls that I don't trust the people in power to make on areas where I'm not even sure it's a good idea to have depolarization. If what you mean by depolarization is how you elaborated it, I'm like, no, I want to polarize more on vaccines. I want to polarize more on Pokemon. I want to polarize more on Democrat stuff. It's like, I think that's.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to go to the other extreme.
This is why I was going to jump in earlier because I think when he says depolarization, I don't think he's trying to say like make everyone centrist. I think he's just saying show contrary views.
It's the content.
I don't know, but which have it. I think he wants more engagement with opposing views, not necessarily, and that's what he means by depolarize.
Yeah,
exactly. And it would have a depolarizing.
How would that deprioritize Hassan, right? If Hassan is an extremist and Hassan is not represented in American society, wouldn't this promote Hassan types?
No, I mean,
this is where like among his echo chamber.
But I think this is where
his group. Yeah.
Well, wait.
But that was more my second strand. That was my second strand anyway.
I do want to get into the rest of my super chats before we get into that. We only have a couple more, so don't worry. Give me more money, gang. Okay, $10 from Word to the Wise. Not direct government control. Could an independent public body with court review and due process handle narrow, high-harm false claims the way courts handle fraud, defamation, incitement, etc.?
So I think that there's a difference here, and that is the court's inquiry when it comes to fraud has to do with the fact of the matter about whether or not there was some misrepresentation and inducement that caused some kind of financial harm, independent of your political views, independent of particular content, other than focusing on like deception and lies. When it comes to defamation, same kind of thing. It's a tailored look at only statements of fact, a false statement of fact, that are defamatory in their nature, and it excludes things like opinions, right? And so these are much more targeted, tailored injuries or tailored inquiries for the court to be engaged in. But we don't generally give the courts the power, the broad power that is being proposed here, to just like think generally about the harmful effects of speech and make censorship decisions based on that. They are focused on kind of iterated and historical exceptions relating to lies and deceit of specifically factual statements of fact, and so it's not as free flowing or generic discretion given to the courts. They're really
Yeah, but
focused
sure.
on
But
things.
the super chat was really good because it said narrow, right? So maybe, for example, anti-democratic views. So
Yeah,
better
you
the,
could
more,
than
then
the
50.
more narrow you make it, the less the less it has a normative punch in
at
that.
the moment it doesn't even exist. So let's at least have a narrow range of
Okay, so you
things
propose
that
one
go.
which is anti-democratic views. So that would include like what, all of MAGA?
Well,
Or
that
like
would be
another thing is
great,
like,
but I mean,
do we think criticism? Do we think like there are valid criticisms to make of different types of democracies? Does that turn to anti-democratic? Like if I'm someone who believes in more direct representation and I'm criticizing proportional representation, is that anti-democratic?
it's some form of democracy. Talking about enhancing democracy and
Wait,
looking
sure,
at
but
studies.
do I have to include that I'm for this form of democracy to critique representative democracy?
Well, language
or
is
I'm
in
fine?
context. Again, I mean, you
I
would.
can't wait for Samuel Alito to make a decision saying that supporting Joe Biden is anti-democratic. I just can't. I love this idea of giving the Supreme Court more power to fuck with my shit.
Yeah, but okay, but then you're saying get rid of all courts because courts can be
I'm not
corrupted.
saying that. I'm saying I don't
Okay,
think it's
but
competent.
it's the
It's
same
a question
thing,
of
right?
I think he's going
institutional.
to, the court
It's a
shouldn't be
question of
ruling on what
institutional competency.
I think he's saying also the courts probably shouldn't be ruling on what speech classifies as what that can be banned.
Exactly.
Just
That's
on
why you have
general
these
Is it
bodies.
just the
or
enforcement, or is it the rule? Right. So, like, let's say this was a government advisory committee, and they submitted a report to some of these social media companies with recommendations. I
But
mean,
it's not
honestly, probably a
recommended.
lot of them might do it, might go along with the recommendations. Are
yeah,
you
I'm
fine
fine
with
with
that now?
governments having best. Wait, no. So I'm one of these people who thinks that this Twitter files thing is bullshit. I'm fine with the government like proposing things to companies, and oftentimes companies in good faith, not this government, will work closely to go after child predators, to stop misinformation according to their own policies, or maybe they'll be influenced to adopt certain policies. As long as it doesn't take the form of coercion, government's allowed to talk. Government's allowed to try to convince social media companies. I'm fine with that.
So if they
That sounds like
expanded
a
it to
reasonable thing to
this
do.
idea of depolarization. I mean, I'll give a better, I think, definition, which is, I don't know, making like less like rage bait, clickbait that's like targeted at people, right? Like maybe that could be
Yeah, if the government
depolarization.
wants to try to convince the social media companies to do that without using its coercive authority of the state, I'm fine with that. That's basically what a lot of the members of this is what the Twitter files was unearthing, right? Was the recommendations by the FBI. Hey, we think this is in violation of your policy. That's just like that's fine. I have no problem.
But
with that
it's not
whatsoever.
illegal in America because these platforms would then actually make less profit, and so any of these companies that are owned by
they weren't
shareholders.
bound
No,
to do
because they're
that.
not
There
for
wasn't any
it.
threat.
It would only be illegal if there's some force. As long
Gotcha.
as they're just
Okay.
saying, "Hey,
No, but
Okay,
but my point being is that these companies would make less profit from doing
I
that.
do want to move on. Like
Yeah,
you guys
maybe,
are giving like
but
$100 answers to $10 questions, and we love it.
All
We
right,
love the
shit.
energy, but I want to move through. $5 from True Striker. I missed the entirety of the discussion, but Pisco probably won. Good game, boys. We'll take you for the $5. $5 more from Sexy Jedi. What do you mean can't get rid of social media algos? Just have strict chronological followed only feeds. Absolutely no For You type feeds allowed.
I think
So,
this is just a really bad idea."
You just said
because, like,
ban algorithms. That's broader than banning social media algorithms.
It's personalized
broader-
algorithms, I think
Yeah.
you're saying.
Yeah. So,
Well,
so
even
if
if
you
it's
meant
banning
something more
social media
specific, you should have
algorithms.
clarified that.
Also, even if you say banning social media algorithms, he's like, just you can only follow only feeds. You won't see any new creators, which you'll be more insulated. Like, I don't know. This seems like a
Yeah, it'll
and,
fuck
and
up
it
a
also
lot
probably
of
most
people's.
of you probably don't want this. I don't want to go on Instagram and just like I don't really follow anyone other than my friends and a couple select creators. Most of the videos I like on Reels are not from creators I follow. I think that's I probably like being able to find new
Discoverability
Yeah,
would
but
absolutely take a hit.
wouldn't you rather get less of what you like but have a better effect overall? I mean, it isn't just about what
No,
we
not
like
necessarily.
here,
Look, I like soda.
there's ways to
I
get
know it's
something I
unhealthy
like
for
that's
me.
also-
I like it though. I want to drink. Anyway, whatever. $10 from Radel PPB. The most important part of the conversation seems to be about misinformation and how propaganda has radicalized people. I also don't think this is a problem with algorithms. Algorithms tend to give you info you want to see.
So in response
Yeah,
to
that's
that,
the problem.
you can have something that's more tailored to like misinformation, and then you get it out of the problem of like defining what are the harmful opinions, and it's like, okay, well, what are just about like untrue things? But again, what's rearing its head is this issue of institutional competency. With respect to these categories of unprotected speech like fraud, defamation, this kind of stuff, there are big limiting factors that prevent the courts from going usually right beyond the four corners of a specific dispute or the nature of a statement. And there's these big like sort of carve outs for if things are opinions, right? And so it's a much more tailored inquiry. It's an exception, yeah, sure, but just having general misinformation guidelines, that's way broader, and it encompasses a lot of unfortunate line drawing problems that I don't trust the people in authority to do in this broad way. I don't trust Trump certainly do it. Frankly, I don't even trust an independent agency, because I think a lot of the powers that be, either they're way too far beyond what I would say. Remember the SJWs back in the day, like who would say all this identity politics stuff and would be oftentimes I think inconsistent about the application. I don't trust them in charge of that shit. Like if you were to say, for example, that trans people shouldn't be involved in sports, would that get you banned as hate speech or as misinformation or whatever? Isn't that what Destiny was banned for? I don't trust these motherfucking people. Just let us keep your hands off of our fucking free speech, government. That's my view.
But I mean, do you think that courts shouldn't deal when there's a line drawing problem, like a heat paradox type problem? Even in the legal system, you have these types of problems.
Paradox?
Well, it's the name that's easier for me to remember. So like when you have a grain of rice and then you have 10,000 grains of rice, and then somewhere between those
It's not
grains.
a Swordy's paradox.
yes.
So let me tell you why, right? Let's just take defamation as an example. In defamation, you need to have words that in their nature, right, undermine that are defamatory in nature. In other words, that they undermine your standing, your reputation. So in its very nature, it's limited to particular individuals as opposed to like broader effects. There's an attenuation to those parties that are injured or not injured. It needs to be a statement of fact, not an opinion. Okay, so that gets us out of the realm of people who are saying harmful views, right? It's not defamation to say, for example, that you think it's your opinion that vaccines are unhealthy and unsafe. Additionally, there are requirements when it comes to publication, right? That you're publishing it. So there's the elements of it limited in major ways, and there are additional First Amendment guardrails that are there to really focus the court on statements of fact issued related to people's business reputation, and it only covers false statements. And so
that's exactly what I want. That's exactly what I want an agency which would have the same
but the
level
more
of authority.
narrow it is, the less needed it is, right? If it's really narrow,
It's better narrow than nothing at all. We have nothing now.
Then what would be covered by this? Give me some examples of content creators that should be deprioritized on this view.
I'm not going to go through everything that every content.
Give us two. Give us two.
Let me give an answer. So I think maybe he's saying like you could have you could encourage social media companies to have maybe like a defamation department, right? Because there's a lot of defamation that happens on the internet, and it's not really resolved by anybody. And
Okay,
like,
so
it takes a
let's
lot.
get out of encouragement. Encouragement, fine. We don't care about encouragement.
Yeah, but
So
I don't agree with
everyone wants
encouragement.
encouraged.
We've had that. We've had this for a decade
Okay, again,
now. It's not
I
working.
just want concrete examples of two content creators or individuals who you think should be de-boosted by your by what you're advocating.
But it's not about what I think;
government
it's about the
imposed
evidence,
criteria.
right? I mean, frankly, maybe I'm going to sound arrogant, but I'm not going to watch the kind of thing that would be the kind of thing that I'm talking about here.
You can't think of anyone?
problem.
Well,
Yeah, but
okay,
it'll be like saying if I thought someone was guilty just off the top of a hat, like tell me who's a
there are
murderer in
people I think are
society.
guilty.
I can't do that. I don't know.
I wouldn't
I'm not.
convict them in the court of law, but I could make you an educated guess. Like, yeah, that guy's probably up to some shady shit, even though they haven't gone to court, right? Like Trump hasn't gone to court for a lot of things that I think he's probably guilty of.
And to be clear, there should be measures before banning. There should be a whole host of measures in terms of
Okay,
just
we're
not
not-
being
we're talking about
recommended.
Whatever you want to
Yeah.
say is imposed by the government that's going to have an effect. And remember, the weaker and more diluted the measure is, the less effective it's going to be, presumably on your view. I'm not
Yeah,
convinced
sure,
that
but
even manual will be effective, but go ahead.
I'm trying to be very neutral here in terms of what I'm arguing for, and so that we can find some kind of compromise. I think even more extreme measures at this point. If you look at Moldova, for example, in the election that they just had, they basically banned. They worked actually with Meta on this, and they've maintained some of the measures in terms of keeping extremists and foreign actors off their platform. It's been very effective in terms of getting rid of extremist views among the populace. It's something that should be seen as in a narrow way applicable here. But
Can I ask a question about your three-prong thing? Sorry, I interrupted you guys.
You could also just use they've given you a pretty powerful loophole that you could just use, right? You could just say you can just say what you want the social media companies to do, but you can just say well, it's recommended by a government agency, an advisory committee that'll work, that will probably work anyway.
It doesn't have the force of law, and so
exactly.
Right?
The punishments need to be way heavier than they are now, right?
Well, I think.
Wait.
What about Stephen Colbert?
Stop, all of you stop, please.
Sure.
Just a quick question for Mr. Reason. So when you say the penalties have to be way more, you don't even have to name a name. Say I break one of these penalties. I promote some sort of one of these pollutant ideas that you think is bad, and my algorithm doesn't depolarize people, right? And it instead specifically polarizes them towards the pollutant idea that you think is worthy of deboosting. And I break these laws. What happens to me?
Okay, so you're a platform, not an individual,
I'm a platform, right? Yes. I own.
Okay, cool.
I own W, the Wix server. Okay, the Wix. The everything app, but for Wix, okay?
Okay, so the first strike...
I've broken this. I'm like, I fuck you, government. I hate you, government. I want to... we're going anti-Trump all day, every day. No pro-Trump stuff is allowed on my platform ever. So we don't get
I don't know. Now it's straw man. Now it's straw man.
I have a pollutant idea, a harmful idea that you think is corrosive to societal good that I also promote.
I'm not suggesting any legislation goes anywhere near saying, oh, you're anti this person, right? Or that you're even anti an idea, so long as it's framed correctly in terms of being factual, in the same way that a court will decide what is factual. So as much as you can argue against this, then you're simply going to argue against a legal system.
Yes, whatever I'm doing is
because of the risks of a legal system.
What happens to me, the question is...
But you're not just arguing about factual information and saying, you don't want people who in good faith say something wrong to be deboosted, right? You're not saying that. This isn't what you're...
What if they do that repeatedly?
Also to be clear, you're not... This was a question I asked earlier. What counts as misinformation, right?
Well, in terms of being decided as to be factual, just like we do in the court of law.
Yeah, but then I'll bring back my other example of the Hassan genocide thing, right? Is that misinformation? Is that an opinion? How do we draw the lines on that?
No, as I said on that, I think on that front, because there are views along those lines.
Because you said you're fine with that personally. My question is, what if the government body decides that's not fine? Now an entire segment of discourse online is gone.
Yeah, sure. So let's keep to the factual. Let's keep to the stuff that really can be decided as factual then. As I say, let's have a conservative approach. It's better than what we have already, right? And there are factual things. For example, on climate change.
How do you... Can I ask, how do you restrict that from going into that type of stuff, right? Because presumably, this government body would then decide what's factual or not, right? Even if it's independent, they are now in charge of what's factual or not.
Yeah, sure, like a court does.
Yeah, but how do they go about deciding, what restrictions...
By looking at the evidence in a way that I can't right now to start demonizing certain creators on platforms. I simply don't want to do that.
What if they look at the evidence and say that this type of saying is what's committing a genocide?
I still want an answer. If I break the law, what happens to me?
You get a visit from the Ministry of Truth. Okay.
No, but
it's a warning.
Which means the platforms, because this is what
Yes, I'm a platform owner. I am a CEO of the platform. I break this law. What happens to me?
So eventually, over time, you're going to end up not being able to function as a platform. You'll be basically blocked. It's the eventual point, right? There should be that should be allowed. Just as when there's acts that are piling up in terms of behavior, it's not about the first measure or the second measure. It's about over time. That power should exist.
Okay, so I want to now directly. I feel like we're using the court point as an aegis, as a shield, and I'm going to go right to it. Okay, I have no problem with government agencies or courts making factual determinations in the abstract. Okay, I'm fine with courts making factual determinations. Who hit who? Who was negligent? Whether or not something is expressive for purposes of applying the First Amendment doctrine. Whether or not something is fair use or not. There's some factual components to that as well. So the problem isn't with determinations being made by government. The problem is the government making factual determinations as to the harmful effects in general of expressive conduct and infringing on that right. Okay? So factual determinations as to who murdered who, that's fine. Go have it. Factual determinations as to what's a pollutant or not, fine. Go ahead. Factual determinations as to the risks of drunk driving, if a legislature wants to make that, that's fine. But we have this rule in the Constitution. It says Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech. And so it's the factual determinations as to censorship decisions where there isn't a more narrow carved out historical exception like defamation, obscenity, that kind of stuff. And even there, sometimes I'm worried about how much they're stretching these, the obscenity doctrine, etc. So, but that's what I'm concerned about. Not in the main government's making factual determination. It's using factual determinations to predict the harmful and second order effects of speech in a way that undermines a right.
To piggyback
That's what we do with
before you address
pollutants.
that.
That's what we do with pollutants.
Just real quick, just before you address that, it's not just the courts can decide who is guilty and not, but should people disagreeing with the court's decision be penalized or deboosted? I don't know if that's a world I want to live in. Go ahead.
Like, for instance, it is a factual matter. Wait. So, it is a factual matter that Donald Trump has immunity. But like, if I'm disputing that in the legal sense, I'm technically arguing no, that isn't true, right?
Yeah, and that's exactly. You've given a good example. Yeah.
But I'm saying, wouldn't I be then? My speech is. I feel from what I've heard from you, it's like that's no longer protected.
Yeah,
but as a creator, it's. Well, I mean, you're not going to. You're going to be warned, just like we can get warned on YouTube if we put something on there that's got copyright against it, right?
The algorithms would look at my content, either ban it, depending on how far egregious they think it is, or suppress it, and then that discussion is now suppressed. If I'm arguing, or like another thing I actually am curious about. Sorry, first address that, but then I have another thing right after.
No, but I mean, as I say, like if you just said one infactual thing and you don't have much influence as well, I mean, that's another aspect of it. In the end, it's about effect. I'm just simply interested in what has effects. I'm also, I really appreciate Wick's position on this, is about overreach and how far this can go, and also about it actually getting put in place. If you suggest something really extreme, nothing ever happens. So, I'm not interested in that. I mean, I guess I'm coming from more of a British perspective where we're almost there in terms of having measures like this, because already they have power to do more than just financial
but you don't like
penalties.
Can I ask one question? Wait, what about debates? How would that be approached under your idea? That is actually something
you guys are laying out a very so you guys are laying out a very specific set of facts. You're saying like you're saying this over and over again. Like I am very much bothered by exactly the government, punishing people for speech based on laws. But you're not really giving any reason for why. I agree, you've laid that out very specifically as what you are bothered by descriptively. You haven't actually justified why.
By justification, or do you mean ethically justify?
Of like why? Yes, ethically justify
why that's an issue. Wouldn't that be Pisco's explanation?
I would like to respond to that. You're saying you've descriptively talked about some stuff, but you haven't normatively. That's just bullshit. Of course, we've spoken normatively with respect to standard notions of normativity related to utilitarianism. This works, right? In terms of results, we're saying it's bad for results and for utility when you give the government this kind of power that corrupts easily. I think that's kind of intuitive and implicit in what we're saying. Also, in terms of any kind of deontological system that standardly might use, freedom of speech, that's often considered a negative right that's protected by many deontological systems that people agree with. So I think that there's normative weight to what we're saying, and it isn't specific to any specific normative ethical view. But yeah, we're saying it's bad.
Let's Stale explain.
Really say,
go ahead.
It doesn't really say bad in comparison. My argument would be the things that are bad are based on how much power somebody has and how much of monopoly on power that things are. The government does have a lot of power.
I want to address you real quick, Stale. My problem here is, and I understand, and we all agree that tech companies having all this power is also bad. But government having the power is worse in my mind in a way that tech companies isn't, because the government also has a monopoly on force, right? It also has all these other powers that they can bring to bear that a tech company does not. And so while I can agree that both are bad, I think giving the power to the government is worse.
Which is why the First Amendment says Congress shall make no law. It doesn't say companies, doesn't say you as a private homeowner. It says Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech.
You've even conceded to like the government advisory thing as something that's like of a fundamentally different character when the effect would be the same.
It's not enforcement,
that's
right?
not abridging the freedom of speech. That's
sure.
I mean, right now,
hey, wait, it'd be
the
the
reason
equivalent.
why
Okay, wait.
force-
There's a difference. There's a difference between me saying, "Hey, could you do this for me, please?" versus me saying, "Hey, could you do this?" or I have a gun to the back of your head, right? That's obviously the difference between the two solutions. Obviously, I'm being a little bit.
But this is the other
but
extreme.
the
Like,
obvious implication here is that what you said with the government advisory is just, hey, you guys should do this. This seems like a good idea to do. Versus, hey, if you guys don't do this, there's fines, there's punishment. You have to do it. Those are two very different circumstances.
Yeah, Biden was doing the former, not
You-
the
you
latter.
just
and I was,
said- okay, you just
that's
said-
fine.
Okay, even that though, you're just saying it's different. So the reason why I would say
Wait, do you
force
think those
can be
aren't
different-
materially different? Wait, no.
No,
Do you think
no,
those aren't
one of-
materially
one-
different?
One abridges the freedom of speech and one does not.
Like, one has a binding force behind it. One is up to the platform to decide. Do you think you don't think those are materially different?
From the perspective that I'm talking about, which is does it work? No. The answer is it might
Okay,
be
but
like
that's not the distinction that we're focused on, right? So you're saying that we haven't distinguished it, with respect to our own lights, but we have. Now you're saying I don't care about this distinction between something that abridges the freedom of speech or something that doesn't. Maybe you could inquire as to
Sure,
why
because-
one does and one
sure.
doesn't.
The
But we
reason-
have
I mean,
explained a difference.
let's just think about a bit about the future and where we're going, right? Because I think, frankly, America at the moment, and Europe will probably follow suit, is going towards an oligarchy where these private owners basically become, close proximity to the government and therefore have all this control. And what we're trying to do is, well, I'm hoping we all want this is to prevent that, right? But at this point in time, this current trajectory with, Musk, who is in and out of the White House, depending on if he's doing God knows what he's doing. There's such a close proximity between the owners that we're already at this point.
I agree with that fear. I think it's a legitimate fear, and I don't think acting like China does anything to prevent that fear. Okay, like this is what China does.
No, but that's the other extreme. I mean, I don't want a China. I want actually. This is the other thing is the ambiguity of what freedom of speech is in the modern world. And that comes down to the ambiguity of what censorship means here. I actually want less measures, certainly in the UK context, that goes after the individual. I don't want an individual to feel that they can't speak, even if what they have to say is absolutely stupid. And the only way to do that is to put more onus on the platforms. So I don't want a China. I want something that is nothing like any of these examples that you give.
Let me finish.
Putting more.
Let me finish
sorry,
my
go on.
super chats. Okay,
Sorry, Rick.
$5 from It's Vishy. I don't know. I love my TikTok algorithm. I like One Love Island videos, and my page now is just memes. True. Word to the wise. $5. Clarification. I was talking about speech broadly. Misinformation that can cause damage. Who determines truth? Someone does, and they need evidence.
Yeah, no. I mean, I don't know what that's getting at. Yeah, misinformation that causes damage. Some of it is articulable as a civil wrong that we think that government is allowed to go after, and some of it they're not, right? So misinformation that constitutes fraud, yeah, you can go after that. Misinformation that constitutes defamation, go after that, yeah. But not just generally government decides that this information is harmful, therefore stamp it out. I mean, down that road really does go China. Down that road really does go.
I'm going to get through these
UK
quick so we can get to the
stomping down on
discussion.
shit.
And then It's Fishy, $2. Here's my money. Please go buy yourself a caramel candy. Oh, well, thank you. And Trib1 for 6 months. This is a $20 dono for real, no cop on God. Okay, thank you. Tesco Johnson, $2. Strawman Wick, $5 from the Trib1 to say, so Stale and Foreigner are saying, Reason, his name's Reason. So Stale and Reason are saying they want people to get out of their hug boxes and be radicalized. Sounds odd. $5 more from Trib to say the government should be a guardrail, not to determine what's generally good or bad on an individual level. And no offense, Foreigner, I missed your name. And $2 from the Trib1 to say W court packing, join us, Wick, join us. And then $10 from Pondering Politics to say, how does the panel feel about court packing? We're not going into court packing today. We are sticking on the topic. And with that, go ahead.
I think we have to agree that things are really bad. I don't even know how much worse in our democracies they can get without ceasing to be democracies. I'm really, really concerned by that. I think we all share that view. And I'm not proposing a China. I actually want to prevent that happening. And so we have to take some preemptive measures here. Now, if we all agree that we're in a pretty terrible situation, then we agree that some meaningful measures need to be taken. And I've heard no alternative to the slightly risky, but less risky than what we have now.
Sure, I'll
measures.
give you.
I think
I'll
we
give you
disagree.
something. I think
we
the biggest
disagree.
problem is foreign influence. So laws targeting foreign influence and other things in a harsher way, I'm all for, right?
How do you determine whether it's foreign influence or not? Like, because you could have a foreign.
Well, we can
IP
track
addresses.
that. That is a fact-based claim that we have
Well,
data on.
I think the question is like, do we ban like foreign influence from X? I think like stuff like when foreign influence is usually happening, I think it's less.
I don't
so
think
we can- we
banning's
can't
the way.
really-
It's there are other targeted measures such
Well,
as.
I was gonna say so. Something's like I think a lot of the foreign influence we talk about is like astroturfing through bots and stuff, right? Or like bots that are posting accounts. I think that's something we could target.
Yes.
But it's not just about bots, it's troll farms, right? There's actually people behind them too, in Russia, for example. And it's always going to come down to these heat paradoxes. And I'm not denying it, and we should always recognize that and try and address, when we get the line in the wrong place. But a lot of these problems come down to these
that's a
types of
cop-out,
things.
bro. That's not what's happening here. We're not talking about defining at the exact point at which it becomes too odious. Okay, that's no different than this cop-out about, well, courts decide facts, right? No, that's not what's going on here. The question is one of institutional competency. Do you generally trust, on a general level, for the government to decide what speech is too harmful, such that it should be deprioritized on social media algorithms? That seems like it's not a Sorties paradox. That seems like a
They're
general
both
question
issues.
that-
I think what's getting confused is we bring up these examples and you think we're trying to say where's the line. When we bring up these examples, we're trying to illustrate that like the line gets blurry and we're trusting the government to make the right decision, and that we aren't really sure that we can because of that institutional competency, especially given how protected free speech and how essential it is to a functioning democracy.
Well, you're always
And feel
you're
free
always
to
trusting
propose
somebody.
discrete
right?
categories. Feel free to propose discrete categories of what kinds of content you think are like a clear case, right? So for defamation, we have some incredibly clear cases where this kind of thing is definitely defamation. We have no problem with the government going after it. Now, where are those examples from you, right? Wick has asked you.
Well, as I say, I already gave you.
I have asked you multiple times. Give me some content creators. Give me some example statements that should be deprioritized from some of these content creators, right? Give me something from Hassan. I know you have something from Hassan, so give me something from there that would fit here.
But as I say, like I mean, him denying that Hamas has committed crimes against Palestinians, or in a way that dismissing it in a way that could be construed as this, and doing this repeated times.
Okay, so that's an example. So the first example we have is Hassan denying Hamas war crimes. Okay, all right. So let's take that. That is his determination as to either the facts on the ground, which he is almost certainly wrong about, or it's his legal opinion for what that's worth. And you're saying, right, that in virtue of his denial of those war crimes, similar to the regimes that we have in Germany of like denial of Nazi atrocities or whatever, he should be deprioritized on that view. What about people who deny Israel's war crimes?
I mean, if someone is saying that they definitely haven't committed any war crimes, I do find it a little bit concerning, if I'm honest. But I mean, I think a lot of people who
say Israel has not committed war crimes. There's no evidence of genocide. There's no evidence of ethnic cleansing. Deprioritize.
I think it's quite.
Yeah, what
it's
if Facebook
questionable.
does that?
I actually do.
No, stop with this cop-out style.
No,
It's not going to work.
here's
for
the
me.
thing. No,
It's not
no,
going
But
to work.
the stale's right. Like these decisions are already being made.
I do want you guys. Hold on. I want you guys to answer Pisco's question.
You're doing an attack.
You're bailing him out.
No, you're.
There's a
doing all
difference
these
between
attacks.
Facebook
You're saying-
independently doing that and saying the government must require that they do that. Those are two
Sure, and
vastly
so
different
what
things.
you're saying is I want Facebook to do it instead, right? So every
No, I
argument
actually
you're
don't
making,
want
We don't
Facebook-
want.
no,
we,
no,
I don't
so
want
we
Facebook
don't-
to
I
do it, but
actually
I don't
don't
think
want
the
Facebook to do
government
that.
can mandate
That's
it.
different.
Sure,
But someone's
there's
always
no
going to
middle
do
ground.
this.
So, yeah, literally.
Exactly.
Can you answer the
you're-
question?
there's nobody-
Someone's always going to do this. So we don't.
Yes.
I don't agree that Facebook should censor that opinion from the pro-Israel guy, and I actually don't think that they should censor the hypothetical Hassan statement or the actual Hassan statement regarding Hamas not doing it. I think that in general, those views should be allowed to stand. That's just my view on platform moderation. Maybe you disagree, but that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is government restrictions. And so the question stands unanswered, which is with respect to a pro-Israel person who denies the existence of Israeli war crimes, who further denies the existence of Israeli ethnic cleansing or genocidal intent, should that person be deprioritized?
I mean, if they're saying it's my opinion, or they're saying it's been determined that Israel definitely hasn't committed war crimes, I think that statement, yeah, that should create the deprioritization.
The second,
Because one is a factual, one's an opinion. I mean, that's
It's very opinionated.
So the second one, which is to say, it has been determined that Israel has not done war crimes. That statement should be deboasted. But the statement to say that they haven't done it should not be.
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of these creators will evolve, right? To say softer things to avoid being deprioritized. But
Okay,
at least
now
we
we
have
a
that
problem,
effect.
right? Because when Hassan says they haven't done the war crimes, you said the equivalent statement from Israel should not be banned. That's just an opinion. But you started this by saying that Hassan's statement that Hamas hasn't done war crimes should be deprioritized.
Yeah, because he's saying that
Are we
fact. No,
just
I'm saying
going to preface everything
that's
by,
not
in
true.
Minecraft now? But instead of in Minecraft, we're just going to say, "Oh, it's my opinion."
In my opinion.
Right? Like,
Yeah,
that's weird.
it's gonna. It may have some of this effect, but it still is some progress. And in the
I don't
end,
see the progress there.
and
Can you address there's a problem here, because you said the expression of the opinion of Hassan regarding Hamas war crimes, that is sanctionable, but the expression of opinion about Israeli war crimes is not sanctionable.
no,
I thought heard
I
you say
said
that.
exactly the same thing. You could replace the name of the party, and I will agree in both cases or disagree with both cases, depending which
Wait,
statement you want.
sorry. So I'm going to ask you directly again. Should Hassan be deprioritized for claiming that Hamas has not done war crimes? Yes or no?
Yes, he should be deprioritized. Just as
And should
if
someone who
someone
says that Israel, in his opinion, that Israel
no, not
has
his
not committed
opinion.
war
Not
crimes-
you've had an opinion now. You didn't have an opinion in the first time.
Okay, yeah.
So that was not.
So 1-to-1, the Israeli guy says, I don't think that Israel or Israel.
No,
has
I don't
not-
think.
He doesn't even say. Okay, fine. Israel has not committed war crimes. Hassan says Hamas has not committed war crimes. 1-to-1, both people deprioritized.
Yeah, if it's part of a common pattern. I mean, what I said was something even stronger than this.
Answer the fucking
listen.
question.
Okay, well then listen to my answer then, because you didn't listen to what I said before. I said if someone has said it's been determined that, or it is known that,
I'm
in
not
a way
asking
that.
that fucking hypothetical. Let's deal with the one I'm actually asking. I'm not.
Okay,
asking
there's
it's
something
been
weaker.
determined. I'm asking the other one. I'm asking the one in which he says Israel has not committed war crimes, and where Hassan says Hamas has not committed war crimes. I'm asking you to elaborate. And is the answer the same for both? This is now the third time I'm asking.
Yes, yes, yeah. I've said yes
and
before.
the answer
It's
is
not I
they
said yes.
both should or should not be deprioritized.
It's part of a pattern, not just a one-off. I think you should create a
why
deeper.
is this not the answer?
Albert Gap. Wait, please, Albert Gap. Let's say they
Is this
both
the yes
have
no
repeatedly-
question?
Wait,
Crazy.
let's say
No, this is why you do it,
I got
because
this.
you
I got
can't
this.
give a straight
Please, I got
answer.
this. Let's say they both have for about 2 weeks been consistently repeating and saying this, like Hamas has committed war crimes, Israel has committed war crimes. Now we have a pattern. Is it a 1-to-1 where they both are either deprioritized or are they
Exactly.
prioritized?
Yes.
If
They're
if part of the
deprioritized.
pattern- a
Yeah.
pattern of what?
After that period of time of insinuating that something that is not, that's the opposite of what's factual, right? Or stating there's a fact where there is no fact, right? And they've done it repeatedly over 2 weeks for sure. Yeah.
I just don't understand that. So when you're saying that, like, the fact that they say it multiple times over a course of weeks, that changes your disposition on it, right? So
Yeah,
it's
just
the
like
same thing.
swearing on stream or anything else.
On
kind of
week
effect,
one,
right?
on week one, they say Israel has not committed war crimes. Week 2, Israel has not committed war crimes. Week 3, Israel has not committed war crimes, and now they should be deprioritized.
Well, yeah, goes back to this is why I said the heat paradox is an important aspect of this. There will have to be a line drawn. But there
Maybe
needs to be a line
I think
drawn.
that's fair to say that, like,
Why
we
does
don't
the
know when it
number of
crosses a pattern.
iterations-
But yes, yeah.
Why are the number of iterations of the expression of the view? Why is that determining anything? I understand that you're
Well,
generating.
you asked
now,
Goebbels. I mean, he was right on this. You know, you keep repeating a lie enough times, it becomes the truth. I mean, that is what happens psychologically. Like
but why-
one-offs, and also
Okay,
we.
that's a very generic statement. What if it was more specific? Like, hey, here's a picture of a war crime happening, and it's just like a picture of like a completely different country, and like because that's like this misinformation goes on all the time, where somebody will post an image.
I understand that's an easier hypothetical for you guys to distinguish because it seems to be more connected to facts, and I understand that therefore is a more comfortable one for you to deal with. And I mean, no doubt, right? But like,
But the point is, we're
there's a
trying to
reason why
determine,
you
like,
can't. Yes.
The point is when we're
The
trying to
issue of
determine like
opinions being
when
harmful.
exactly when do opinions and facts intersect, right? Like does
in-
disagreeing like, and this is what I brought up earlier. Does that the Israel Palestine one's a great one? Does disagreeing with a court case, because that's not that now that's a fact of the matter technically, is that now no longer fact, right? It gets really weird when we start saying misinformation can be censored, because what is misinformation? When does opinion become misinformation?
I think that's a very good.
Who determines
That's
it?
a very good question. In court cases, many times, right? There's a whole bunch of organizations that try to exonerate people who have been found guilty of murder or other heinous crimes. Are they now going to no longer be able to be boosted by algorithms? Because
I
a
don't
court has
understand
made a
what-
finding of fact. They are going against this finding of fact.
OJ is guilty anyway, right? So
Yes.
let's take that example.
Are they going to be deboosted now?
If they're giving you other grounds to believe something, which would be the whole point of them doing it, right? Then they shouldn't be boosted. For example,
hold on. So as long as Hassan is giving
Genuine-
reasons that he believes Hamas didn't commit those.
yeah,
war
sure. If
crimes.
he say, or I don't believe Amnesty International, the whole ream of organizations that he's disagreeing with,
Yeah, they're not trustworthy. They're
then he's
biased
giving an
against the
opinion.
Palestinians.
Yeah, sure. And at that point, you can't do much. You can't do anything
Yeah,
against
but
it.
wait, let's take this to
you
Right.
understand
vaccines.
how that's
Wait,
gonna
let's
make
take this
it
to
so
vaccines.
no one-
It's the
it just-
vaccine stuff. Yeah,
It
exactly.
takes the tooth out of this. It takes the teeth out of it.
This
It just-
effectively means
It's better than nothing. It's
But
far
no,
better
it
than
is
nothing.
It's not
It's
better
fake.
than nothing, because now you have the government involved, so you've added that risk in exchange for effectively nothing. That was why it would be worse. Because now think about it. Apply what you just said to vaccines. How does this deal with vaccine misinformation? Because you said they're matter of fact, but I don't trust those institutions.
I
In
don't
fact,
trust
and we've seen the autism
controlled
rates go
trials.
up. We've seen
Yep.
autism rates go up and vaccines go up. I've now provided evidence for my claim. Right?
Hang on. The Surgeon General, or sorry, not the Surgeon General, the Director of Secretary of Health and Human Services has said that vaccines are dangerous. So I have official sources now, and you're doing the misinformation. You say that there's no connection between autism and with respect to vaccines. Well, guess what? The Secretary of Health and Human Services says differently. And so you're wrong. I'm right. You can't deprioritize my shit.
Yeah, well,
I don't
you're
know.
giving something factual, and that's the whole point. Like, you already took the risk of having
Well,
a
so then there's
Surgeon
no-
General
but then there's no
in the US, but it doesn't mean
My
to say
point
you
is
shouldn't have a Surgeon
we're
General,
effectively
right?
in the same exact media environment of misinformation, but now we've added like government controls what is misinformation or not, which is so much more dangerous.
And
But that's why
crucially chilling, because what will happen is if this line between fact and opinion is one in which it's kind of unclear, and we can have opinions about factual states of the matter, the end result of it is people are going to be more afraid to speculate. And
social media companies are going to ban speculation.
Platforms are going to ban that kind of speculation
because they don't want to get
because
hit.
They don't want to
get
incur
fined.
liability.
They don't want to get
Yeah.
their platform banned. So
Yeah.
they're going to go with the safest route that they can. And if you are too overly speculative, then you're going to be silenced from their platform.
Or
The
you don't
platforms
adhere
will
to the
decide this.
epistemic
Here's
standards of the
problem,
Trump
like,
administration or whoever's in charge.
it's the same reason why people should, in my opinion, be able to, if they believe something, say something, even if it's wrong. Like, if you think there's a fire in
But
a
I'm not
theater,
disagreeing with this.
you should be able to shout fire in the theater, right?
Yeah, but you're still going with the Minister of Truth. It's really hard to defend the Minister of Truth argument. Like, you could you could have added a layer of misdirection, right? So you could say, like, the government, maybe they're not choosing it, but they require by law that social media companies have to hire people who are determining misinformation. What is that a reasonable law? I mean, that would
No, I
achieve the same
don't think
fact.
that the government should require social media companies to make their own little misinformation.
Wait, also
boards.
this
I don't
doesn't.
think that
Wait,
should
also
be a
this doesn't
requirement.
fix the problem, right? Like this is still the net state of affairs, right? Social media companies can just hire people that they agree with, right?
Yeah, but they're not doing a good enough job right now. So, like, maybe they should
we
be forced to hire
agree.
more.
$2
right?
for
Wait, no,
Jessica Johnson.
wait, stop, wait. To be clear, you're saying they should hire fact checkers, and your critique is right now they just hire people who they agree with. I'm saying they can just hire fact checkers that will agree with them, and nothing changes.
$2 from Testicle Johnson.
I mean, sorry. Yeah.
W British guy. Thank you for the $2. His name's Reason
Thank
Riffs.
you.
Okay, that's his name. Reason
Foreigner,
Riffs.
British guy.
British guy. Okay, $5 from
I don't mind
Mitsubishi.
it.
I think
Thank
the
you, yeah.
nonpartisan independent PBP would have made this better. $5 from the Trib 1, An alternative is at what we have now, but yeah, we could add some antitrust measures, but ultimately our relationships between government and companies are fine. My listening library for $5. Pay for YouTube Premium, Wick. I swear if I hear another ad the next time you're trying to argue a point by referencing YouTube video, heart emojis? What, are you going to love me more? I don't know. What's the threat here? $5 from True Striker. Social media was a mistake. Jesus wept. $10 from the average Jake L. Is there an alternative solution being proposed? Or is the counter argument?
Yeah, so I want to address that, right? Like,
okay, go ahead.
It would be like saying, okay, we have this problem with social media, and I'm proposing that we just, like, I don't know, nuke the entire country and start over because we're just permanently fucked. And you're like, no, that's dumb. You're like, well, what's your solution, dude? Well, we're here to discuss particular sets of proposals about government action. And I don't think that there's a really amazing government solution to what's happening here. And unfortunately, that's just what I see as true. And any given proposal is going to be sort of addressed on its merits. Now, maybe you could do some stuff on the margins of, with respect to antitrust, but it's not riskless to just try things with respect to government action and with respect to rights.
No, I agree.
This is kind of what I said earlier. Where I said, like, I kind of want the government to be able to do this, but I see no effective way without having major risk that also has some level of effectiveness. I think the unfortunate truth is there needs to be some cultural shift for this. A lot of the changes we want to happen, which I don't know how that. Like, I agree right now. Maybe I'm not offering the best counter solution, but the issue is that doesn't just because I don't have a counter solution doesn't make your solutions good either, right?
No, that's what Pisco's point is. But
how do you convince the current censors to change their mind? Because we have a current list of censors, and you're basically saying, what do we need to do to make them do something?
I literally just said, wait, to be clear, I literally just said, I'm not sure how you would do this. However, my point after that was, before you go, well, you're not providing a counter solution, is my point is your solution is not better. It effectively changes nothing with adding risk of putting the government in charge of that, which is a higher risk. So for me, the status quo can be bad. Your solution can be worse.
But if we're talking about
directly, so Stale has some other sets of issues that he cares about, is like the concentration of power within corporate hands and oligarch hands. All right. So there are a couple responses to that. The first is on the notion of antitrust. You're like, okay, that's stupid. That's on margin, whatever. It's not thousands. Put that aside. Public option. If the issue is corporate control, make a public option. That's not going to resolve the issue of government potential corruption, because that's just an avenue for government to get involved too. But at least they're not, it doesn't involve the government in regulating and policing the private. It just creates an alternative there. So if the issue is corporate control, public option, antitrust, what else do you want to do? You want to ban social media companies, or you want to just monopolize them? Have more startups, have the government, I guess, fund startup tech companies, whatever. If you want to use resources there, that's fine. But you guys are describing two different sets of issues, some of which might have a government response, and some of which I think don't have a good public response.
Also, another thing, on top of the government, if the government wants to combat misinformation, I think the government needs to have better communication. One of the big critiques that even doctors made during COVID.
How does it communicate though? Through
social media? But like the thing is, wait. One of the big critiques that was made during COVID was the government was changing certain policies back and forth at times without explaining the rationale behind why, and it led a lot of people to doubt the government in that regard. I think that's a prime example.
Yeah, that's another issue.
Isn't always well, sure. But my point is that type of communication can actually be utilized through social media, and that can actually help combat misinformation because people see the government actually getting on their level and explaining things to them versus just making changes that they don't understand.
I mean, I don't know. Look at the current government communication on social media.
Well, sure, but they also that I feel like they get a lot of flack for that, right?
Yes, because you have the official White House account putting. Oh, never mind. Okay.
Wait, I don't disagree,
yeah.
but I'm saying that communication highlights strengths and highlights weaknesses, and that's actually good. We want more interaction.
I will get through these. $5 from It's Fishy. Who is the best non-question answerer? British guy, Rob Noor, or Ryan/fraudulent lawyer Malali?
I don't endorse that. I don't think it's fraudulent.
$20, Evil Elrond. Free speech isn't the issue. People taking foreign money to spread misinfo is the issue. We got to lose the loophole they use to get away with it.
Sure.
The old, I didn't know they were foreign excuse, as made famous by Tim Pool.
Oh, wait, hang on a second. You're saying there should be some kind of strict liability for people who unwittingly take foreign money, and result for their speech-related activities?
That's
stupid.
That's not a... I don't know about unwittingly for foreign money, but if you can be proven to be knowingly taking foreign money to spread something...
if you're willfully blind, that's something else. That's kind of some amount of knowledge, but that is what the inquiry is pointed at. And I would acknowledge the notion of willful blindness, but if you genuinely aren't aware then
Yeah.
I don't think that you
All
should be
my
sanctioned.
super chats right now could be from Russian assets. I wouldn't know,
Yeah, you
right?
don't
Like
fucking know.
Russian assets, Putin could be paying me through the nose in
But
super
th-
chats.
this, Wick, this
wouldn't
proves this is exactly my point, that it shouldn't be the creator's responsibility, but the platform will see it in the context of what's going on as to what kind of influence these things are having, and just what the intentions are behind these actions. So often creators could be used as vessels because they've been influenced themselves, right?
I don't know.
The
Impose
platform.
reporting requirements. Make these social media companies of a certain size report findings and have some amount of accountability in terms of reporting to Congress. I'm okay with that. I'm not against
Or like
all
take
regulation.
didn't Ashley Sinclair real like Turning Point USA is giving like payments and they're hiding it through like consulting firms can direct these payments by having like impose greater
Yes.
financial transparency for stuff like
I'm for that.
Disclosures, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
for that. Yes,
seems like a pretty
absolutely.
good
Better
idea.
transparency. I wouldn't even want to ban money in politics so much as just require it be disclosed, right?
Well, depends
Well,
on what
that's
you
the
mean by
real
money
red
in
pill.
politics. but, like,
Sure, but this isn't going to do it anywhere near
for-
enough.
you know what I
red
mean?
pill
Like-
is on Citizens United, because how are you going to square this with Citizens United? Because the whole notion, I thought you guys were based on Citizens United. The reason why there's that decision allows for independent expenditures of a given quantity is some of these issues. Like, do we want the government in charge of saying, well, this corporation, even though they have free speech rights, they don't get the same kind of priority as that kind of corporation
it's a
in
hard
terms of their
question.
speech rights. And
It is a hard question.
these are really tough questions, and we don't feel very good. I think in general, we shouldn't feel very good about the government making these kinds of editorial decisions unless it's really narrow in scope and sort of targeted.
because of their
Well, keep
complications,
it narrow
there
and
are bound to be
targeted, but that's
major
better than
errors.
nothing.
$20 from
We don't
Susie.
wait, but again, you keep saying it's better than nothing. We do not think it's effective.
Think it
we
makes
feel like
things
you haven't
better,
demonstrated
yeah.
it's effective.
20
so then you're
yeah.
introducing risk that doesn't exist otherwise.
$20
Yeah, but you're
from
not in
Susie
a
Max.
neutral
I have
position.
to look.
Sure.
This is just a
Well,
one-word super chat. Let me read it. $20 from Susie Mags to say hi. Hi. Okay.
Hi.
$5 from Word to the Wise. Take Alex Jones. He was sued successfully for defamation. Freedom of speech wasn't destroyed. Why can't we expand and go after cases like that?
Defamation is a category of unprotected speech, and the conduct there was absolutely egregious by Alex
Wasn't it
Jones.
on social media? By the way, it was on his show, and he got sued over that. This would probably be the best example of this just isn't an example of anything.
Yeah,
I mean,
and just to be real, he defaulted in many of these cases, and he didn't even raise a lot of these arguments because he was. That's how bad faith of a litigator he or the litigation strategy that he pursued. He was like ignoring court orders and stuff like that. So that really is a horrible case to be like, well, we should do all of this additional stuff because there was a defamation case that went after a defamer. Like, okay, no, we can have defamation and be consistent in our approach, which we are.
Sure. $10 from Riddell, PPP. One good example is intentional misinformation that is factually untrue, that is meant to cause harm, all in lieu of success and financial gain. That type of content should be able to be limited.
Intentional lies, right? So independent of defamation, an intentional lie. Saying something like the Democrats endorsed something they definitely didn't endorse, right? In a way that isn't like defamatory of any particular person.
Exactly.
Now, no,
Yeah,
I don't.
could you expand that out
I do
to
not.
groups?
I do not agree with sanctioning over knowing intentional lies, unless it's defamation. I don't want to get that even more broadly because again,
Why?
think about it. You're asking the government because you don't realize what you're doing. In the given example, you're like, how can you say that? Because you have to think about the rule as applied in the real world. And what is the rule as applied in the real world? You're inviting the government to scrutinize any given conversation made in public to determine whether someone is lying and to start investigations of people and chilling their speech in virtue of the government now looking for what, at first blush seems like reasonable to target, but having it be as broad as you're suggesting will cause the mere investigation, the mere sort of looking into.
As I
these
say,
kinds of
make it
comments.
narrow.
Wait, there's
And-
like three. So there's like three issues come to mind right
Well,
after
you
that.
got hold on.
One-
You gotta let I was almost
Reason,
called
go.
him foreign guy. ReasonRiffs.
You
You
can
gotta let
Google it, it's fine.
ReasonRiffs respond.
As long as you're smiling when you say it. Look, you're making these parallels that just simply is a little bit unfair here, right? You're saying the government directly is deciding all of this stuff, and frankly, that's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about a body that's far enough away from the government that we're talking.
Is it the government? Yes or no? Is it part of the government? Yes or no? Is an independent agency part of the government? Yes or no?
Well, you have to answer me this question
Is it
before I
part of
can
the
answer.
government? Yes or no? I'm sorry. I'm done with the shit. Answer the fucking question. Is it part of the government?
As much as a court.
Yeah, the court.
As
The
much
court
as
is
the
the
court.
government. So yes.
Court is part of the branches of government, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, then yes. If you mean it as much as a court, as much freedom as.
For government, you are advocating. So everything.
Yeah, but you're making it sound like the government can just decide on a Sunday. Oh, I don't like that.
Wait. Based on what you said earlier, it would be controlled by a legislation, right? The legislation would set the terms for it, and then it would exist, right?
Yes, but the
It sounds like a
legislation would be fairly
semi-independent
loose. The
executive-
legislation.
To be clear, from what it sounded like to me, it's like a department created by a legislation that will be like a semi-independent, like executive thing. At least that's how it.
Think of it like a national bank. A really national bank is the best analogy here in terms of the freedom.
Okay. This are the three issues that I said I saw right off the bat. We have wrong versus lying. So how do we determine whether or not someone's wrong versus lying? Now that shows my speech because I'm concerned. Well, if I'm just wrong, I might get censored. And that's not, and I might actually that prevents me from wanting to seek information. That might prevent me from wanting to discuss things. Next is government decides what's wrong. This is the issue we've had all the entire time. But not just that. So now we have to deal with the whole stuff we got into over. What is misinformation? And lastly, I'm really curious how this interfaces with debate, because if I'm having a debate with someone, I can be wrong, but I'm having that good faith interaction. But how do you know if someone's intentionally lying in a debate, right? This is my issue with this whole intentional.
It's about pattern. It's about patterns.
Yeah,
right? I mean,
the issue is it's scrutinized speech, because anytime I'm wrong, I could be subject to investigation.
Do you not think it's good that people are a little bit more considerate that what they're saying is right? This is the whole thing we're trying to encourage.
Yeah, but I also don't want to chill speech so much that people are scared of being wrong that they stop talking.
Well, then that's about the barrier in which we apply. I mean, that's not hard to see. I mean, and there's study after study on this stuff.
You can't guarantee that. And again, in the context of defamation, it's private litigants.
Okay, Pisco, I'm going to give you a yes or no question. Has anyone ever been given the death sentence in the US of A that was actually innocent? Has it ever happened?
The death sentence is actually innocent. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes, very occasionally, it's about looking at risk analysis, right?
Yeah, but I'm against the death penalty because I don't think that risk is worth it. Wait.
So we're not saying that we're not in favor of some trade-offs. We're not saying that we want perfect enforcement all the time. What we're saying is your general approach and your general strategy, the risk is not worth it. And I want to finish the defamation point, and then I'll hand it off. The defamation point is, at least when it comes to defamation cases, it's private litigants who, as Wick described, do not have the kind of enforcement discretion and power, monopoly on violence that the government does. In those cases, highly narrow, historical tests, lots of guardrails, really difficult in America. And so yeah, there's nothing inconsistent about the approach. There's no line drawing fallacy going on here. It's all very above board. And yeah, so I guess I don't know what the response is to that.
$50 from Dirty Deeds for free says, sure hope someone brings up the largest issues with the internet and how South Korea handles this. The biggest issue being foreign bot farms being used to directly affect public perception to destabilize the USA, like Russia, China, Iran.
Yeah,
I feel like we mentioned this before. We said, I explicitly said we should be targeting those
he
bots.
can say whatever he likes, okay? I won't censor him.
Yeah.
But go ahead, Reason. Can you respond to the I want to give Reason and Stale a chance to respond.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I agree with this point. And then sometimes people will be classified as bots who aren't classified as bots. I've just had my passport rejected because they thought my photograph was fake. I mean, these things happen sometimes with any of these measures, but these are clearly low-hanging fruit and things that should be done. But you'll need a body to decide how they're going to measure if someone's a bot. So you're going to still need a decision-making center that's government adjacent.
You're trying to say that our problem with it is that there might be some some good apples that fall in with the overall good policy, that there's some people that fall by the wayside. That's not the issue we've addressed. That's a mischaracterization. I'm not saying that because there are some people who will be unfairly included in what's going on here, therefore it's bad. I'm saying the overall strategy seems ineffective to me. Try to find some workable cases, and it seems like it's hard, even as we sit here, to adjudicate whether the statement would qualify as being subsumed into the policy. Just look at the Israel Hassan example that we use. Things that where, if Hassan says over a course of period of weeks that Hamas didn't commit war crimes, that's somehow different for the virtue of whether the speech should be protected, whether he says it one time. I don't know. I'm not convinced that this is going to have a meaningful effect on the discourse or help things in any way. I think it's going to introduce a bunch of risk. And overall, I don't think that risk is justified, not just because of one-off cases. That's a mischaracterization.
So you think that we should have the risk of status quo, which is where we're going right now?
I say the status quo is preferable to what you're suggesting. Yes, that's in the argument.
That doesn't mean it's what we would ideally want. It's just saying that the solutions you're offering aren't necessarily better.
Sure,
And
but
do
you're
you realize the
assuming
risk is that we
now in
lose freedom of
America?
speech? Actually,
But
this is where
throughout
the
this, you guys have tried to attack this from a neutral position. You're not doing a neutral position where you can just say that solution is bad. You are saying I prefer the current censors, right? That was been the issue.
I don't know what you mean by like. What do you mean by when you say it's neutral? Like you say that we don't have a view. We have a view. We're partial to the status quo in virtue. And compared to your view, right? So that's what we're at. That's not a neutral view, right? That's against you.
Sure, but I can almost make every single argument that you guys are making. I can say like, oh, are you okay with Mark Zuckerberg, taking out Hassan or something? Because like they can, you have to bite the bullet. You have to say, yes, I guess I do. I guess I am okay with.
But I
him.
can say I don't
with
like
him.
it,
Wait,
but I can also say I don't want
Yeah.
the. Wait,
okay with
I
him
can be
having the right to
against
do
the
it?
status quo. I can be against the status quo and say it's bad that he has the power to do this, and say I don't want him to do that, while also saying I do not want the government to be in charge of speech. These are not.
But that's the other
contradictory
extreme.
claims.
You understand that it's not a binary choice here. The amount of power that you could give to a body could be very minimal,
I'll be more
but substantial enough to make a difference.
I think that the risk that you guys are talking about right now of like, I think that like the risk of like, sorry, my dog is barking outside. I think that the risk that exists right now of like insulated, people being insulated in their algorithms, people's extremism, doesn't go away with these solutions that you propose. They might even get worse, and now you're putting a huge risk on freedom of speech from the government that doesn't exist right now.
In an unprecedented administration, at least in the U.S. context, and again, I just like maybe this might be a different kind of calculation. Although, to be honest with you, I wouldn't have a difference in disposition on it. But like, certainly in the age of Trump and in America, this would be a disaster if Trump had this power. If Trump had anything, even if you say it's like an independent agency like the Fed, it would be a fucking disaster if there were any kind of regime like this with Trump in charge.
How is it any more a disaster than X right now? Right? Like,
Exactly.
You can't
Wait.
imagine. Hold on, Stale. You can't imagine how giving President Trump, who's proven to be extremely litigious and extremely vindictive and directing his DOJ to bring prosecutions, how
I'm
that
seeing
would
as
be
Trump-
worse than Elon Musk just banning you or something?
I don't
Yeah,
see how
I'll
giving him
actually-
carte blanche censorship problems based on what
Sure.
he thinks harmful effects of
Because-
speech are.
But it wouldn't be carte blanche. Like, why are we framing this as this
He
binary
can do that now, and
choice?
you have no recourse. So you guys are already fine with the advisory committee. So Trump can right
Well,
now
the difference
call
is,
up
by the
Elon
way, the
Musk,
difference
say,
is,
"Hey,
this
you
would
should
be
do
re-
this," and you're gonna be okay with it, or you're not gonna want to stop it.
Yes, because
right?
the government cannot. And wait, this goes back to what I said earlier.
so-
do you think? Wait. Do you
This is more
think that
dangerous.
it's the same to point a gun at someone and say do this versus just say, hey, you should do this? Do you think these two are the same or not?
I would rather the government do it because I have recourse. I don't.
That's
have
not what I
recourse
asked. You think it's wait? That's not what I asked. That's not what I asked. Is it the same or is it not? Has someone point a gun at you and say do this under force, or just to make a recommendation?
But that wouldn't.
I would rather the
that's,
You would.
So here's
Okay,
why.
I mean
So-
that's fine. We are saying
Sir.
that we don't want that level of force coming from the government. Number one. Number two.
there's a
let's
false
say in the current,
dichotomy.
in the current scenario, someone
you
wait.
can
In the
stop the
current
gun.
in the current scenario, someone can create alternate platforms if they feel like X's right moderation isn't good enough.
No, we can't.
That's what
Not
Threads
really.
is.
It's not gonna
We
work.
have. It's
Threads and Blue
called
Sky
Blue Sky.
exists.
this is such a
There's
false
nothing-
dichotomy.
Go ahead,
It's a
Reason.
false
Reason. I want to
dichotomy.
give space to Reason. Go ahead, Reason.
I mean, you're going from
what's
these.
the false dichotomy? Wait. If you're going to accuse of a false dichotomy, what's the false? Are we saying?
Well, let me
it's-
finish
Yeah,
then.
that's
Stop
why I give him
interrupting.
space to give.
But you, I want you to describe the false dichotomy, and then you're going to
Yeah.
admit that we're not doing that. Okay, so go ahead.
Look, if you gave a body like a limited amount of power to implement some of these measures and had a really high bar for when someone is clearly like spouting off things that we all agree that are simply not factual in the same way that a court does, right? The notion of like giving this image of holding a gun to a head, like to do that, like if a Trump version 3, God knows what mutant that would be, got into power, right? It would have to change so much of that system that it's changing the system, which he could do anyway. Like it
What's the false
wouldn't be that
dichotomy?
thing that he would. Because it's not a body that would have. You're so
What's
scared
the
of the
false
state
dichotomy?
having.
You accused us of doing a false dichotomy. What's the false dichotomy?
Because Stormwolf was suggesting like the government would hold a gun to their head. It's like nowhere near that. It's
That's
so
not what I understand. A false
tepid.
dichotomy.
Okay.
So that's a false dichotomy. Is saying that this would be giving the government more power.
It's all or
to
nothing. It's
use.
like the government has almighty power or has no power. It's just not like that.
He didn't say that. That sounds like you're strawmanning him.
Well, shooting someone is an almighty power. Like giving
I
this
think when I
imagery
initially
of
gave this hypothetical, the point isn't to say
Wow.
that. The point isn't to say the government's gonna kill you. The point is saying that I do not want the government to be mandating speech laws through force versus making a recommendation, because one of these enforces
clear
it
what
and
you were
basically gives the
saying.
government direct control versus one where the Twitter or X or whatever can say, maybe not. Right? These are obviously
it's clear
different.
What you were saying, we weren't characterizing the power that was being offered by what you're saying as ultimate power to do whatever you want. That's a mischaracterization of our view. What we're saying, it's a kind of power that we think is abusable and is subject to risk. And what I heard Stale just say is, it's not. There
Yeah,
wouldn't be
so-
any additional risk to Trump having this kind
Sure.
of power. That's
Sure.
insane.
Yeah. So here's why. He can do that right now. You understand that? You understand that you have no recourse.
exactly.
There's nothing you can
What
do.
do you mean?
If there's,
Wait, when you say he can do that, when you say that, what do you mean by that?
he can call up Elon Musk and deplatform Hassan, or something.
Wait, so hang on, son. He does have the power of influence over these people because they're all crooks or whatever. But what doesn't he have the power to do that is being on offer here? What he doesn't have the power to
He has a much less likely to work way of
in
using
courts,
the courts.
right? Because
Yeah.
right,
yeah.
yeah. So that is less
So less
power,
power.
right? Yeah. So having these kinds of laws, which are affirmative grants of authority to the government to do these kinds, that increases the likelihood of him being successful in court, and thereby it increases the tendency of his threats to have the desired effect, doesn't it? Yes or no?
It's a second option that's less good. So I guess by having an additional option,
gives
that
him
is
more
that is an increase.
leverage,
Yes.
doesn't it? So of course
It
makes
gives
the
a
threat
worse-
more palpable. Of course,
A second option that's less useful.
You really have
Yes.
to be brainless.
But it
to
takes
think that this
leverage
kind of regime
elsewhere.
would-
It takes leverage away elsewhere,
Where's
and then
Where
It
does it take
is
away leverage from
another
that?
option that is less useful. You understand
Hold
that?
on,
You understand that he
I
can do all
want,
this
I
right
want
now.
Reason to explain
Yeah.
where it takes the leverage from.
Yeah. how
well,
does it
right
take away
now,
from
if
power?
Musk wants to ban someone off how could anyone stop him banning people from his platform right now?
Yeah, I'm not worried about banning. I'm worried
I'm
about
not- that's
people
what we're
fighting,
talking
you were
arresting,
before.
and imprisoning.
We're not
Like it-
talking about
Wait,
the
okay,
private
wait. You
censorship.
said, how can anyone
Yeah,
stop
so you're talking about
Musk?
like if Trump wants to do it. If Trump wants to ban somebody off of Twitter right now.
Yeah, he might be able to influence Elon Musk to change policies or whatever. I don't doubt that. But the question is, does this increase his power? And the answer, of course, is yes. To deny it
Wait,
is
why
to
do you
deny
say
it.
of course?
Hold on. Elon Musk can ban you. The courts can imprison you. That's the difference.
Yeah, but you wouldn't have that.
Number
You-
two,
you-
number two.
Can get Elon
Wait,
Musk
wait,
to
I-
ban
I
you.
didn't say that platform
Wait,
owners can be put in prison or put against the wall.
Are there
You
different
said that
platforms
they
that
can
exist from X?
take.
Wait, stop,
basically
wait,
take
stop,
my-
wait,
no,
wait.
hold on. This is why I asked you earlier what would happen
Yeah.
to me if I break these laws, and you said over the course of the time, my
Your
my
platform would be
my
shut
platform
down.
would be shut down.
It could be.
The
The
courts can do that.
It can't
Elon
be
Musk
abused.
can't.
It can't be abused. You can shut down platforms, but it can't be abused. What the fuck are you talking about? You guys are in crazy town. You're saying you want more power, but don't worry. This is the kind of power that's not abusable. You must.
Okay,
Wait,
but
there might
this-
be no
I don't
enforcement
know-
mechanism against Musk. That doesn't mean there aren't alternatives you can do, right? And this is what I proposed earlier. Like, well, no, there aren't. There are other platforms you can go to if you get banned. If this law gets implemented, no shot there's other platforms you can get banned. Because if you're doing one action on one platform, you bet your ass that action is an issue on another platform as well.
Yeah, but the whole idea of this body is not that a government could say, "Oh, I don't like that person." Hey, you'd have to change
I agree
the
you don't
system I'm
want this to happen.
suggesting.
It will happen. That's the point.
But it will happen anyway then, because it would be different from what I'm suggesting. So what's different from what I'm suggesting, where you have this almighty king in power, that can happen in the current system.
It's
would-
far less
it would
likely
be
to
such a
happen.
small
Let me get through
step
these. Let
towards
me
that.
get through these. Let me
It
get
can
through these.
happen in it can
Go
happen
ahead.
in an isolated incident. It cannot happen as widespread and as swift
And it's much
as
less
much
likely.
force.
$5 from the average Jake L. Are Pisco and Storm fine with EU regulations on algorithms? An international committee would be based.
It depends on what you're talking about.
I would need more specifics on that. But
Yeah,
like,
I
it
don't
could
know
be
the
fine.
I don't know the
It
specific.
could be fine because maybe you like mitigate like how much ideological stuff because of the broad swath of ideology. But like, I'm still kind of skeptical of that. I also
I
like,
think Europe is pretty
international
strict on speech.
organizations.
I'm gonna be
Yeah.
honest. Fuck Europe on speech and fuck all these other. I think America's best
Also,
on speech.
international
USA.
organizations are just
USA.
incredibly like ineffective, notoriously.
$5 from Dan Ban Nad Debates. Dan Band Debates. Okay, that makes more sense. If you want to make public statements, your identity needs to be public as well. you can be held accountable in person, like it was before the internet.
Yeah.
Yes, I really want
there
the
were
people.
anonymous
Some
pamphlets,
anonymous.
anonymous books. Like this is just ahistorical.
Yeah.
And I do not support. Now, I think
I don't
a
want
matter of
randos to hold
policy-
me accountable because they don't like what I say.
Yeah, I mean, there's that. But like, listen, there's plenty of ways to get people's real identification, whatever. I don't think that the government needs to mandate you to unmask yourself. I think that's stupid.
Well, I guess the argument is which I also so agree with. The argument is less to do with government unmasking and more that people are less likely to spread stuff that's untrue or like engage in harmful rhetoric if their name and face are attached to it.
Yes.
I think that's all. But I think that's like a
what
violation.
That's why all those people, when Charlie Kirk was fucking murdered, with their faces fully out and with their public, people will say stupid shit with their full face and their full identity. Like
Exactly. I don't think it's effective.
Yeah,
none of
$5.
this
Doesn't do anything, yeah.
people want to talk shit in America, and you know what?
True.
That's based.
$5 from Riddell. If you could guarantee that you could prevent the normalization of the election being stolen and prevent January 6th, would you limit that information online?
No.
Probably not.
Okay.
Like I think there's
Well, yeah,
fundamental rights
yeah,
that sometimes are like there's ways to deal with the consequences that don't necessarily. I like that's one of those things where like, it's kind of hard to say that we should restrict the right to be able to question an election on social media.
These are the guys who would give away your rights for 9/11, by the way. These are the motherfuckers. Oh, well, the terrorists attacked us, so we have to give up all of our rights when it comes to searches and seizures because of this awful event. Actually, if we're just giving away all our rights, why even be a fucking country? Actually, why not?
No, but Stormwolf said that you the ability to say that the election was stolen, right? But saying something is factual and saying something is an opinion should be two different things here. Surely we can agree that there's a difference between those two things.
We're going in circles. So the answer is yes. That there could be a fact opinion distinction, though I agree it gets murky in the middle. Sometimes there are mixed questions of fact and opinions, or opinions about facts for sure. I don't think that's addressing the ultimate question of institutional competency and effectiveness that we've raised. Yeah, it is. Probably
and you agree that
easier
it
to
could.
determine.
And you agree it could actually encourage people to think a little bit before they speak and say things that are more likely to be factual to avoid being disingenuous?
It would chill people, yes, in a non-socially efficient way, in my view. You think it would be
no positive effect. You wouldn't see any positive effect from it in terms of people's discourse online.
I'm not willing to pigeonhole myself and say that there would be no positive effect at all. But the net effect is, I think, what we're arguing about.
Is there anything we've said this evening that people would be afraid of saying that we've said so far?
I think that what you're proposing would chill people making determinations as to whether Israel committed war crimes, just based on the one example we use there. Why would you do that if you say it like 4 times, or however many times you think is again, not getting into particular amounts? I think it would chill people saying Israel has not committed war crimes or Hamas has not committed war crimes. And you think that's good because that's your political view, but I actually don't think that's good. I think that we should be allowed to make those arguments.
What's my political view? Sorry,
you might agree that it's socially worthwhile to chill people from saying that Hamas doesn't do war crimes. You might think that that's like a good thing to do with government action, but I'm not convinced of that. I don't have a good view that it's worthwhile to achieve that end. I think that we should let people come to their determinations through argumentation. Maybe that's naive of me. Maybe that's fucking naive of me, but that is what I believe.
So encouraging people to state things as opinion rather than dressing up as a fact, it would be a bad thing.
When someone says Israel is not committing war crimes, it's obvious that's their opinion, right? Isn't that clear in the
we spoke about context before
of debates?
I mean, this is about repetition and why it's important here.
Yeah, but repetition, you could if I repeat that enough, it's still an opinion, right? Like, at what point does it change from I'm not trying to ask what's the exact line, but why does repetition change something from being my opinion to being a fact?
Yeah, because maybe it's adding additional context and like the amount that you're iterating makes it seem more like an opinion. Maybe. Here's the ultimate.
It makes it seem more like a fact if you don't say it's an opinion.
The ultimate question is the following: if someone says Israel's committing genocide more than 10 times over the course of 2 months, you think it should be deprioritized?
I think stating without any other context of the information, as if it's factual.
Yes.
Yeah, I find it concerning. I think they probably should be deprioritized.
Okay.
What, 20%, 30% loss of
And
views?
with that,
it's not.
And with that, we're gonna wrap it up. I think. I do appreciate you all for being here.
Of course.
It has been
A lot of fun.
it's been a great discussion. I've enjoyed it. And I hope you guys have too. So if I'm going to give each of these people, lovely individuals, all one and all, an outro, and they can give their final thoughts on the statement. But before we do, if you've enjoyed this content, if you've liked what I've put on here, if you liked the questions I've had, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Come back. We got these shows all the time. Tomorrow, it's me and Bishop versus Destiny and Hutch on whether or not we should throw Democrats under the bus if it helps us to win elections.
Biden specifically.
It should be fun. Let's have a nice debate tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern. Tune in for that. On Thursday, we have Dev and Tali versus Get Money Dre and Bree Lives on whether or not anti-white racism is a problem on the left. Tune in for that as well, and that should be fun. And with that, I'm going to start with Stale, and we'll let Pisco have the last word. Stale, go ahead.
Cool. Yeah, it was a good chat. So yeah, I mean, to summarize my position, I'm not in favor of the government algorithmic minister of truth, but I think that a lot of what we're seeing today has a lot of the same problems as this kind of more extreme option, and I just wish people would think about that and do more things on kind of corporate power of speech. But yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Where can people find you?
Stale 3000 on YouTube and Twitter. So yeah, Stale.
Awesome.
STALE
Thanks for being
2000.
here. And remember, I have links to all their channels on the YouTube description. Please give them a
Hell
follow
yeah.
as well. Stormwolf, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I feel like I want to move on a little bit hard on Reason and Stale. Specifically, Reason, I actually do appreciate a lot of the goals you're trying to go for. I think breaking these algorithmic, like insular machines, are kind of a good thing. I think the disagreement comes from the implementation. I feel like the solutions I've heard haven't been effective, and they increase the risk when you implement the government because of what Pisco and I were talking about with the institutional competency, blurry lines, what counts as misinformation or fact. And yeah, I think there's just a lot of power that you're invoking, and it leads to a huge chilling effect on freedom of speech, which is what I think we're generally trying to avoid, because I do think freedom of speech is one of, if not the most important right that you have in a democracy. It is the thing that people use to challenge the government, which is an essential part of democracy. So that's why I'm very hesitant with a lot of these solutions, even if I like the general premise of them.
Where can people find you, Stormwolf?
My Twitter's linked in the description. Probably start YouTube at some point because I want to start
Check
making
them out,
content.
okay.
But yeah.
Thanks for coming.
Nice.
Reason Riffs, or as they like to say, foreign guy. Go ahead.
Okay, either will do it. No, I really appreciate the debate, and I really appreciate ideas being tested. I read philosophy, and I appreciate the ideas of John Stuart Mill, and he was all about debate and argumentation. So I don't want us to take that away, but we are heading towards a very irreversibly damaged place in our democracies. Some countries are further on that line than others, and I'd say America's further along that line, and part of it is the fear of state intervention, if you want to call it that. And I don't hear any really alternative to this. Musk right now has this immense influence over X. The YouTube CEO was at the inauguration of Trump. They're all really close. I'd rather have an open body that was having some limited influence over this. And the UK already is going towards that. I don't agree with individuals being punished for what they have to say online. I think this would actually take the pressure off those types of laws. So yeah, I appreciate the debate. I'm still not convinced. I can also send you the studies that I've been reading in preparation for this debate that are in line with my views. But yeah, let's keep the debate going on this.
Thank you for being here. Where can people find you?
I have a YouTube channel. I need to do more with it. You can find me with the same name on X as well. And I write for the Pragmatic Papers newsletter. It's looking at kind of center-left politics, some quirky articles. And there'll be an article about this topic that I've written, actually. It's been delayed, so it's probably going to be out the end of the week or beginning of next week.
Okay, and remember, if you read that article to depolarize yourself, you need to read an article that says the exact opposite. But anyway, thank you for being here. Really appreciate you, buddy. We're going to have you on more often. I think you're great. Last, but certainly not least, Pisco.
Yeah, I appreciate the conversation. A lot of fun. Listen, these motherfuckers want to bring us to China and shit. I'm gonna get on my stump right now and be a little bit bad faith. What makes America fucking great, among many of our different rights, the one that I think we just knocked it out of the park with is the First Amendment and free speech. And I don't trust these motherfuckers in the government to tell me that they know in advance, well enough in advance, the consequences of the speech that anyone might give.
that would be justification for a lot of the powers that be to ban people like Destiny, certainly people like Hassan, certain people like I don't know, Kyle Kalinske, these people who we might disagree with now and then, but who should their views should be aired in my view, or at least the government should be able to tell them not to say what they want to say. And you're introducing a level of systemic risk at a time when the First Amendment has never been more attacked. I guess arguably in the John Adams administration, he made it a crime to like critique the government. I mean, that was pretty bad, right? But at least in the modern era, Trump has unprecedentedly used the trappings of the state to go after freedoms, and especially the First Amendment. And so, I don't know, sue me. I'm very wary of the expansion of federal or unitary government authority, even under the auspices of a purportedly independent agency. I think Wick made a really good point that went kind of a little bit under the bus, which is the importance of diffusing power. One of the big cringe moments that I've looked back at my own sort of content and stuff, or not content, my views that have changed dramatically, is I used to be more of a unitary guy. I was like, get rid of these fucking states. Who cares? We're just one country. It's inefficient. We should just all be on the same thing. Holy fuck, was I wrong. Federalism is based. The framers were correct. It's too much power. And in the hands of a wannabe tyrant like Trump or whoever's going to come up next, I think that we need to be more jealous of the First Amendment and these rights. And I'm also not convinced, even if it was not a rights issue, that it's going to be effective. The more narrow you make this rule, the more targeted, like where it starts to resemble categories of unprotected speech, where private litigants often have the right to, like, for example, sue for defamation, the less likely it's going to achieve these like great results for all of society. Especially when you have these kind of like very vague and interpretive words like polarization or extremism that really tend to be in the eye of the beholder. I don't think those are smart criteria. To Stale's point, just real quickly, and I'll end it. I know this is the longest of the closings. He mentioned a lot of things related to tech oligarchy and the current status quo. There are some things you can do to address the current status quo, for not wonderful things that resolve all our issues. And something that I offered was focusing on antitrust and making a public option. That would at least, again, it wouldn't solve all the problems related to government corruption because you're just introducing a new branch of government, but it would at least diffuse power, and I'm okay with that generally. But I don't think the solutions on offer that we've heard presented a good case to abandon, in my view, free speech in the First Amendment.
Thank you for being here. You can find him at the YouTube channel I have in my
Pisco
YouTube
Liddy,
description. Pisco's Hour, Pisco Liddy. Okay, with that, I'll see you guys tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern. Wait, bye-bye, everyone.
Peace out.
Bye.
Peace out.